Chapter 924. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed. In the Donglai continent, due to the gradual recovery of the spiritual opportunity in the continent, demons appeared frequently. Fortunately, the Lu dynasty was at its peak, and there were strong and elite soldiers guarding the area. Once these demons formed a group, they were immediately destroyed. Although they rose and fell continuously in the beginning, it was difficult for them to become powerful. Chongping County, Prefectural Governor's Office. Lord Yuan, I have brought the head of the cloud-moving king of Horseshoe Mountain. A general with a pair of pheasant feathers on his hat stood at the bottom of the stairs, holding a black wooden box high in his hand. Everyone in the hall could see that there were traces of blood seeping out of the box. Yuan Jinping raised his hand, and a personal guard beside him went down to bring the wooden box up. He reached out and opened it. In an instant, a stench spread out, but he did not seem to smell it. He even personally held up the hideous demon head to examine it. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he waved his hand for someone to take it away, and then drew a mark on the merit book. However, when he saw the names of a few demon kings on the book, his brush paused slightly. The generals below him were all jubilant. This cloud-moving king was a flower sparrow that had turned into a demon. There were hundreds of demon soldiers under him, and he often went down the mountain to capture humans and animals for food. Because he could fly and escape, it was extremely difficult to kill him. The prefecture had spent several months to set up a bait to lure him here. It was only yesterday that he was finally eradicated. Although a few small demons escaped, they could not cause much harm. At this moment, a civil official stepped out and said loudly, "Lord, once this demon is eliminated, the mountain road to the south will be opened. We will gather our troops and attack the 7 Arcana demon king entrenched in this mountain. This way, the prefecture will be settled." Yuan Jinping said in a low voice, "Yes, we must eliminate him, but we cannot be too hasty." The civil official was stunned. This speech of his was something that had already been decided. Otherwise, he would not have dared to say it on his own. After thinking about it, he knew that there was a change in the situation. He quickly changed his tone and said, "Lord, you are right. I was too impatient." Yuan Jinping waved his hand and said, "It has nothing to do with you. The day before yesterday, I found out that this 7 Arcana demon king is not one. There are 7 of them. 7 demon kings." The generals present all cried out in alarm. If it was a few hundred years ago, demon kings were nothing. At that time, the Yu Chao Great Lord could kill dozens of them in a single battle. However, after the world was pacified, demon kings were rarely seen. 2 or 3 demon kings in a county were enough to alarm the imperial court. One had to know that a demon needed at least 10 iron spear generals, as well as strong bows and crossbows. Only then could he take it down. However, such a person had to consume the essence blood of demons and use secret medicines to wash their bodies. At the very least, they had to be refined for more than 10 years. If they were placed in the army, each of them would be able to fight against 100. Originally, there were 32 iron spear generals in the county. However, after killing the demons several times, there were also some casualties. Now, there were only 27 people left to fight against the 7 demon kings. Their chances of winning were extremely low. One of the generals said worriedly, "During the reign of Emperor Wuzong, the demons were chased into the sea. We thought that the world was peaceful. Who would have thought that it would not be peaceful for another 20 years? Another person added in a low voice, "There are rumors that a female demon has infiltrated the imperial harem and caused chaos in the imperial court." Yuan Jinping's face suddenly darkened. He shouted, "Nonsense! This is only a rumor among the people. As officials of the imperial court, how can we talk nonsense? You will be fined half a year's salary." His prestige as an official was very strong. With this stern face, most of the people in the hall did not dare to speak. Only the civil official who spoke first was not afraid. He said with a solemn face, "Sir, the 7 Arcana demon king needs to be eliminated quickly. Otherwise, it will become a big problem." Yuan Jinping said in a deep voice, I also know this. However, the county's soldiers have been dispatched repeatedly and are already exhausted. The civil official thought hard for a moment. Suddenly, he raised his head and said, Sir, I heard that an imperial celestial master came to Shangda's celestial temple a few days ago. Why not ask for help from there? Yuan Jinping's eyes lit up. He felt that it was a good idea. He nodded slowly and said, let me think about it. Ever since Zhang Yan's double imparted the qi cultivation method, this method had been widely spread in the mortal world. Even though no one had been able to open their meridians and break through, those who were slightly successful had a strong physique. They could run as if they were flying. They had only cultivated for a few decades, but their strength was already comparable to that of a general in the army. Moreover, this method did not require external medicine. As long as one had perseverance and practiced hard, even if one could not enter Tao, one could at least strengthen one's body. However, this kind of hard work was not as easy as using the demon's bones and blood to cultivate. Therefore, it was not used by the aristocratic families. Instead, it was liked by some poor disciples. There were more common people who practiced it. In the past, in order to deal with demons, they had to invite soldiers to encircle and suppress them. But with this method, some of the weaker mountain demons could be dealt with by themselves. This also attracted the attention of the imperial court. They were afraid that after the common people learned the method, they would disturb the hierarchy. However, seeing that this was passed down by the Shangda celestial master, they did not dare to prohibit it. Thus, they bestowed the title of celestial master to all the double immortals and allowed them to set up temples in various places. Every year, they could pick some disciples to enter the imperial court as officials. Even though some power was given out, this way, they did not have to worry about any chaos. After Yuan Jinping left the hall, he was thinking about how to ask the celestial master to come out and help when a subordinate came to report, Master, eldest master is here. Yuan Jinping said happily, is Qing Er here? I am looking for him. Quickly call him in. After a while, Yuan Jinping came into the hall. He knelt down and said, Son greets father. Yuan Jinping saw that after not seeing him for a long time, his son had become more and more handsome. His behavior was also calm. He was very pleased and said, My son, quickly get up. After the father and son sat down, they chatted in the back hall. After talking about some trivial family matters, Yuan Jinping asked about Yuan Jingqing's purpose for coming here. Yuan Jingqing replied, Son wants to return to the capital and go to Mount Qinghe to seek Taoism. Yuan Jinping was startled. He muttered, Can't you wait for a few more years? Yuan Jingqing said, Recently, I feel that it is difficult to improve my cultivation. After thinking about it, it is time for me to enter the mountain. Yuan Jinping nodded and said, That's good. After you finish your studies, I hope that you can be like the celestial master to protect the country and the people. Coincidentally, there is a matter that I need you to handle. It is suitable. Yuan Jingqing said with a serious face, Father, please speak. Yuan Jinping told him the reason and said, Now that the imperial court is sending troops everywhere, even if I request the heavenly army, I will have to wait for at least half a year. However, if the celestial master of Shangda Temple helps, I think it will not be difficult to eliminate the 7 demon kings. Yuan Jingqing thought for a while. These years, he did not shut himself away and made friends with many Taoist cultivators who practiced this art. Some of them even entered the celestial master's temple. He said seriously, I will definitely pass on the message. Because this matter involved the safety of the people in the county, it should not be delayed. He decided to leave immediately. Yuan Jinping wanted to send a few family warriors to follow him, but he rejected them all. Yuan Jinping also knew that his son was different from others. Not only did he have his own ideas, but he also faintly possessed magic power. He was not too worried, so he gave him 2 good horses and ordered the servants to prepare his luggage. He personally saw him off. After bidding farewell to his father, Yuan Jingqing rode the horse out of the city and headed north along the main road. The 2 horses took turns and galloped for a night. He did not feel tired, but the two horses were sweaty and panting. He found a clean spot by the road to rest, untied his water bag and took out some dry food to fill his stomach. In reality, he was born with the ability to absorb spiritual vigor from the outside, so he did not need water. However, after being suppressed by the talisman for more than 20 years, he was already used to it. Although he went out this time, he did not do so. After resting for a while, his head suddenly darkened. He was very vigilant. He looked up and saw a strange bird circling in the sky. "Young man, you are in big trouble." A voice came from not far away from Yuan Jianqing. He turned his head and saw a sloppily dressed man, Daoren, under the shade of a tree by the road. He kept the water bag calmly and said, "Daoist, what do you mean?" Daoren said, "Just now, one of the demon kings of Qiqiao, Demon King Bo Du, passed by. There is no trace of anyone within a 10-mile radius. But it is circling above your head, I'm afraid it has its eyes on you." Yuan Jianqing took another look. "Is that the Demon King of Qiqiao?" The old Taoist saw that he was not panicking at all and was surprised. He took a few more looks and said, "Are you not afraid?" Yuan Jianqing said confidently, "I am also half a cultivator. If that Demon King comes, even if I don't win, I can still force him to retreat." The old Taoist chuckled and said, "Cultivator? Young man, do you know that there is a difference between big and small?" Yuan Jianqing said, "I have never heard of it." Daoren said slowly, "Exorcising ghosts and bewitching people is the lower Dao, calling the wind and summoning the rain is the upper Dao, maintaining one's health is the small Dao, and living a carefree life is the big Dao." Yuan Jingqing nodded and said, "May I know what Dao you're cultivating?" The old Taoist laughed and said, "Of course I'm cultivating the carefree Dao." Yuan Jianqing asked again, "What is the Dao of carefree? Walking in this world, can you do as you please?" Yuan Jianqing thought for a while and said, "Nothing can be accomplished without rules. Even the emperor of the world cannot do as he pleases." Daoren clapped and said, "That's right. Daoren cultivates this Dao to be free and unfettered. Once he succeeds, the heavens and the earth will not care, and he can come and go as he pleases." Yuan Jianqing said, "Even so, it's not like I have a lifespan of 100 years. So what if I can be carefree?" Daoren praised, "Well said. But there are still ways to live a long life in this world. One can live forever and live as long as the heavens." Yuan Jianqing raised his eyebrows and said, "What a big tone." Daoren smiled and said, "If you insist on it, you are not a guest outside the door. Whether you believe it or not, it's all up to you." Yuan Jingqing said, "I have a technique that can also allow you to live forever." The old Taoist priest said, "What technique?" Yuan Jingqing took out a book from his bosom. The moment he took it out, the old Taoist reached out and grabbed it. The old Taoist took a few glances at it and laughed in disdain. He threw it on the ground and said, "I was wondering what kind of technique it was. So it's this little technique again. Although this technique can strengthen the muscles and bones, it's too shallow and can't be cultivated into any supernatural powers or mana." Yuan Jianqing frowned and picked up the book. He patted away the dust, smoothed the wrinkles and kept it carefully. Daoren sneered and said, "I've told you that these are useless. Why did you pick it up?" Yuan Jianqing didn't answer and asked, "Where can I find the wonderful art that Taoist is talking about?" Daoren instantly became spirited and said, 500 miles from here, there is a remote mountain. There is a celestial living there. His name is Enlightened Person Banyun. He is very powerful. You can go there. As long as you are sincere, you can find celestial fate." Yuan Jianqing turned around and got on the horse. Looking at the direction, he was still heading north. Daoren saw this and called out to him, "You're going the wrong way. You should go south." Yuan Jianqing said, "When did I agree to go there?" The old man's face darkened and said, "Then why are you asking me where I'm going?" Yuan Jianqing sneered and said, "Other than the disciples of Shangda, everyone else in the world is evil. I'm asking you where you're from because I'm going to kill my way to your door in the future." I'll destroy your family, execute your disciples, destroy your scriptures and break your Tao roots. P.S. Happy New Year to everyone. Chapter 925. Destroy my sect and break my Taoist roots. Daoren heard such ruthless words and laughed. You dare to say that you will destroy my Banyan sect with your cultivation without opening your meridians? You are too arrogant. Yuan Jianqing raised his voice and said, if I can't do it today, I will do it in the future. I am a disciple of Shangde Temple. I only need to raise my arm and call for help and there will be thousands of people who will come to help. I don't believe that I can't destroy you all. The old Taoist priest's countenance changed abruptly. Even though he was not afraid of ordinary mortals, he was rather fearful of Shangde, a immortal master who had been cultivating in Mount Qinghe for more than 200 years. Before he came out, his master had also reminded him not to provoke this person. It was obvious that this person's cultivation was very high. His face revealed a ruthless expression. If that was the case, then he couldn't let this person escape. He scolded, Junior, I saw that you have an extraordinary aptitude and kindly pointed out a bright path for you. If you come under my tutelage, you will also be able to cultivate. Since you don't appreciate my kindness, I can only accept you and then kill that county officer father of yours to remove the root of this disaster. As he finished speaking, he waved his sleeve and a cloud of black smoke flew out. It was filled with a murderous aura and there seemed to be the wailing of ghosts and the howling of wolves. When Yuan Jianqing heard that his words involved his father, he immediately had the intention to kill. Even though he had fought demons before, this was the first time he saw such a strange technique and he didn't know how to deal with it. But his character was resolute, he dared to fight with his life on the line. Instead of retreating, he pressed his legs together and the horse under him suddenly leaped forward, bringing with it a gust of wind as it charged towards the old Taoist. Daoren snorted. Even though he had been cultivating for many years, his opponent was not an ordinary scholar. If a man and a horse were to collide, he would not be able to withstand it. In fear, he dodged to the side to avoid it. When Yuan Jianqing was about to collide with the black smoke, he immediately jumped down from the saddle. At the same time, he took out a pair of short spears from his victory hook. When he landed on the ground, he raised his hand and threw one of the spears in Daoren's direction. After finishing this action, he took the short bow from his back and shot 3 arrows in a row. Then, without stopping, he held the other short spear and rushed forward with the momentum of a sprint. This series of actions was used by the elite soldiers in the army when they fought against the demons. Now that he was using it, it was also unusually fierce. After a few steps, the horse was wrapped in black smoke. There was a mournful cry. He fell to the ground, and in less than 2 or 3 breaths, his flesh and blood turned to mush, leaving behind only a pale white skeleton. However, he didn't even bother to look at it. His footsteps did not slow down at all. After Daoren dodged to the side, he blew lightly. Just as he was about to cast a spell to counterattack, the 3 arrows arrived. His expression froze. He recognized that these arrows were used by the army to kill demons. There was a strong poison on them. Even if it was a demon king, if he was shot, his muscles and bones would become weak and it would be hard for him to fight again. Therefore, he didn't dare to let it touch his body, and could only dodge again. At this moment, Yuan Jianqing took the opportunity to get close. He puffed up a gust of inner qi in his chest and blew it out. With a woo-woo sound, a strong gust of wind blew across the ground. Daoren was originally dodging, but when he was pushed by that gust of air, he instantly staggered. Yuan Jianqing took this opportunity and leaped over. He thrust his spear forward and stabbed it right into his chest, going half a foot deep. Unexpectedly, the old Taoist let out a muffled groan and only took 2 steps back before he steadied himself. He turned his hand and grabbed the spear's body. At the same time, he raised his sleeves and looked like he was going to use his previous skill again. Yuan Jianqing tried to pull his spear back, but he couldn't. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, he reacted quickly and simply pushed the spear forward. Daoren was caught off guard and couldn't help but fall back a few steps. His movements were also messed up. Yuan Jingqing let go of the spear, and with a chang sound, he pulled out his knife and chopped down. Daoren awkwardly dodged, but his steps were messed up. He realized that he couldn't retreat anymore, or else he might die under the knife. He didn't care that his body was slanted, he raised his finger and shouted, "Go." As soon as he said that, the hairpin on his head suddenly turned into a black light and flew out. Yuan Jingqing was shocked. If he used his knife to block the attack, he had a high chance of blocking it. But if he did that, the advantage he gained earlier would be gone. When Daoren regained his breath, he would definitely die. He gritted his teeth and allowed the black light to pierce his chest, but he still stood up straight. Daoren saw that his hair was tied up and nothing happened to him. He couldn't help but widen his eyes, as if he had seen something unbelievable. How could Yuan Jingqing let go of such a good opportunity? He shouted and swung his arms, a knife light swept across. Pu Chi, a head flew up, the headless body swayed a few times and fell to the ground. After killing Daoren, he didn't let his guard down. He retreated a dozen steps and looked up at the sky. He didn't know when, but the strange bird had disappeared. After waiting for more than 100 breaths, he didn't see any reaction from the corpse. He knew that it was dead. He relaxed and couldn't help but feel exhausted. He slowly retreated to the side of a tree and sat down. He pulled out the hairpin from his chest and reached into his bosom to take out a Taoist book. Thinking back to the battle just now, it could be said that his life was hanging by a thread. He had a lingering fear. If it wasn't for this book, he would have died. He didn't know what this book was made of, but it was not damaged after being pierced by the hairpin. He thought to himself, this Daoren has special skills. If I didn't fight him with my life on the line, I would have died. As he was thinking, his eyes swept across the corpse. He felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He changed his mind and forced himself to get up. He walked forward and grabbed Doran's clothes. He was surprised to find that his chest and arms were covered with thick white hair. Demon? He was shocked. He suddenly thought of something and turned his head. He didn't know when the head on the ground had turned into a bird's head. Isn't this the strange bird just now? If that's the case, that so-called perfected man Banyan might be a demon too. Because the Taoist said that the location of Half-Cloud Celestial was in the direction of the county office, he wanted to go back and inform his father. However, this might delay his business. After weighing the pros and cons, he decided to head north first. I'll go to Mount Qinghe. This time, I must ask the Celestial Master to bestow me a wonderful technique and learn the divine skills. After I succeed, I'll share it with the people. Together with me, we'll wipe out the evil sects in this world and sweep away the evil qi in the human world. We'll return the world to a bright and peaceful world. Because he had used up too much energy, he sat down and prepared to adjust his breathing and qi to recover some of his strength before continuing on his journey. However, when he circulated his technique, he felt the qi in his body being activated. It was like a spring gushing out from the ground. It was different from the past. After an unknown period of time, his body shook. The sound of gold and jade rang in his ears. In a split second, a ray of light flew out from his body and enveloped him. Looking from afar, it was like the rising sun. At the same time, in the sky, Zhang Yan, who was meditating on the dragon carriage, sensed something. He opened his eyes and quietly observed the changes in the heavenly Tao. Finally, he smiled, the fate of this continent has been completed. It's time to leave. On the North Mountain Road of Chongping County, Yuan Jingqing had already woken up from his meditation. He felt as if he had broken free from a layer of shackles. He felt light and comfortable, as if he wanted to fly. It was as if he could fly away with the wind as soon as his feet touched the ground. He instantly knew that he had crossed the threshold. From now on, he was no longer a mortal. If I can't live forever, no matter how high my cultivation is, it's all an illusion. This time, I'm going to seek Tao. I must ask the celestial master to bestow me the method to live forever. After he made up his mind, he led the other horse over and hung the monkey head on the horse's head. Then, he flipped onto the horse and with a wave of his whip, he was on his way again. After running for more than 10 miles, he heard a voice in the sky, "Which family are you from? Did you kill my disciple?" Yuan Jianqing pulled on the reins and stopped the horse. He raised his head and saw a cloud in the sky. On it sat a Taoist in hemp garments. However, this person only had the upper half of his body. From his waist down, there was nothing. At this moment, he was glaring at Yuan Jianqing. His heart skipped a beat. Flying in the sky was very similar to the methods of the Celestials in the legends. Ever since he opened his meridians and broke through, he restrained his aura. He cupped his hands and bowed, "May I know who is the Celestial Master's disciple?" The Taoist in hemp garments looked at the bird demon's head and said angrily, "It's tied to your horse. Do you still dare to play dumb?" When Yuan Jianqing heard this, he immediately kept his respectful words and sneered, "So you're that half-cloud immortal?" "That's right. I killed this bird demon with my own hands. Such a harmful demon should be punished. If I meet him again, I'll kill him." The Taoist in hemp garments said angrily, "How dare you? Since you killed it, you'll have to pay with your life." He was originally a disciple of Xian Zhao Palace. Back then, he tailed the dragon carriage all the way here. However, when he was trying to break through the forbidden area, he was ambushed by his junior apprentice brother and fell into the sea. Luckily, he had a rare treasure with him, so he was lucky enough to survive. Later on, he encountered a monster in the sea and had his legs bitten off. Although he had survived for more than 200 years, his cultivation had been reduced by more than 10%. His temperament had also become very bad. The reason why there were so many bird demons in Chongping County was not unrelated to the fact that he had secretly passed on his skills. He had done so for the sake of the bird demon who could carry him across the sea and back to the abode of immortals once his cultivation was accomplished. The bird demon who had been killed was the one who had benefited the most from this. How could he not be furious? Just as he was about to use his mana to pull Yuan Jianqing up, he heard a dragon's roar in the sky. Before he could react, he felt the world spinning. When he came back to his senses, he realized that he had been thrown into the sea and there were giant cliffs all around him. He was shocked and said, "Oh no, why are we here?" He knew that his junior apprentice brother had not left all these years and was now cultivating on the sea. Just as he was about to escape, he heard a surprised voice from afar, "So senior apprentice brother is not dead. Since you're here, why are you in a hurry to leave? I'll treat you well." Yuan Jianqing knew that he could not fight against the Taoist in hemp garments and thought that it would be difficult for him to escape. However, suddenly, the person was wrapped up by a cloud and disappeared. Just as he was surprised, he saw a dragon carriage coming from the sky. A black-robed Taoist was sitting in it and there was a child standing beside him. When he looked up, the Taoist's eyes met his and he was stunned. The child stood up and said, "Yuan Jianqing, didn't you want to go up the mountain to seek Tao? Now that your teacher is in front of you, come up and greet him." Yuan Jianqing's body trembled as if he had just woken up from a dream. He immediately bowed and said excitedly, "Disciple greets teacher." Zhang Yan looked down and said, "Yuan Jianqing, you were originally a spiritual plant from outside the sky. Because I accidentally fell into the mortal world, you were reincarnated as a human. You and I are considered to have karma and we need to have a master-disciple relationship. Today, I want to drive the carriage back to the mountain, but the journey is long. Are you willing to go back with me?" Yuan Jianqing hesitated and said, "Of course I'm willing. However, I still have parents and I'm afraid that I won't be able to be filial after I'm far away." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Filial piety is the right thing to do. Since that's the case, I'll give you 2 things." He raised his hand and pointed. A golden light fell and went into the space between his eyebrows. He said, "This is a scroll of Taoist book. You can study it in detail. When you're done with filial piety, you can activate the talisman and come to Donghua to find me." Yuan Jianqing quickly bowed and thanked him. Under his gaze, the dragon carriage rode on the clouds and gradually disappeared into the sky until it disappeared. On the ancient path on the cliff, there was only a young man standing there. He looked into the sky and did not leave for a long time. Chapter 926. Dongshin Continent, Shenwu Mountain. At the top of Tsangzhu Peak, there was a flying hall suspended in the air. Outside, there were long corridors and pavilions suspended in the air. There were also streams and waterfalls, flowers and pine trees. The light was like ripples, and rainbows gushed out. It looked like a fairyland in the clouds. At this moment, in the main hall, Fu Baoxing was sitting in the middle, wearing a feather robe and a star crown. On both sides were 23 personal disciples. Perhaps his aptitude was not the best among his peers, but he was very good at running the sect. Ever since he took charge of the sect had been renewed, and it was getting stronger day by day. The disciples sitting in front of him were all taught by him, and 7 of them had reached the 3rd tier of core transformation. He believed that in another 100 or 200 years, there would be a few more Yuanying cultivators. But at this moment, the atmosphere in the hall was solemn. Fu Baoxing said in a deep voice, "Today, I have gathered all of you here to ask for help from the Zhongtai sect." "Huaishan, tell them." "Yes, master." A cultivator with a square face and full of righteousness answered respectfully. This was Fu Baoxing's eldest personal disciple, Long Huaishan. He had entered the Tao for more than 300 years and was one step away from entering Yuanying. He was one of the few people with the highest cultivation level among this generation. He first looked at his peers, then said in a loud voice, "Last year, sect leader Qiao discussed with our sect about exterminating the remnants of Xianyu sect. But before we started, the remnants of Xianyu sect invaded Celestial City 3 days ago. Because they had the help of the Python clan, sect leader Qiao could not handle them, so he wrote a letter to ask for help from Hanyuan." On the first seat on the right, a beautiful but murderous female cultivator sat. She looked displeased and said, "Why did he come to ask for help again? Why does such a big Zhongtai sect always need me to help?" Sitting opposite her was the second disciple, Wan Gufeng. He sighed and said, "Junior sister you can't blame sect leader little Qiao for this. He is the new head of the sect and is not as prestigious as old sect leader Qiao. Moreover, there are martial uncles who take advantage of their seniority. Not only are they unable to order him around, they are also obstructing him everywhere. No wonder he wrote a letter asking for help." After the Zhongtai sect's previous sect master, Qiao Huanzhuan, annexed the Xianyu sect, he mixed the techniques of 1 or 2 sections. He forced the remaining disciples of the latter to go into exile at sea. However, because they had the support of the Python clan, they couldn't be completely exterminated. Now, 300 or 400 years had passed. Because Qiao Huanzhuan was nearing the end of his lifespan, he had hurriedly passed on his position to his grandnephew, Qiao Sun. He went to be reincarnated. However, he didn't expect that this move would cause many people in the sect to be dissatisfied. He often agreed on the surface but opposed in secret. They were unwilling to help, giving the Xianyu sect a chance to breathe. Instead, they built another celestial city on the sea. As a result, the bizarre scene of Zhongtai being forced into a disadvantageous position appeared. The female cultivator called Junior Martial sister. He said, "Senior Martial brother, it's not that I'm narrow-minded and don't care about the big picture. Over the past decades, Zhongtai has asked for help several times. When did I, Hanyuan, not lend a helping hand? Last time, even the disciple I thought highly of died. If Zhongtai doesn't pull himself together, it'll just be burying my Hanyuan's disciple in vain." Wan Gufeng also sighed. He also knew that disciple. He entered the core transformation realm after 50 years of cultivation. He could be said to be the strongest among the younger generation, but he died halfway in the last battle. It was no wonder that his junior martial sister was so resentful. The lower disciples had more or less lost disciples because of this. When they heard this, they all agreed with him and voiced their opinions. They all thought that this move was inappropriate. Long Huaishan said loudly, "Everyone, listen to me. The Python clan's goal is to find a foothold in the continent. If Zhongtai falls, then I, Han Yuan, will have to face the demon clan. Are you all only willing to help when that time comes?" A disciple said disapprovingly, "Zhongtai sect has Tao Xinren as a revered disciple. What can the Python clan do to them?" Long Huaishan said in a deep voice, "Although Tao Xinren is a revered disciple, don't forget that the Python clan also has the old demon Luo Mengzi. The two spiritual masters are wary of each other, so why would they fight? But if Zhongtai's sect is not strong enough, I'm afraid Tao Xinren won't be able to protect them." "Junior martial sister," he said, "senior martial brother, although what you said is reasonable, the situation in the sect is different from the past. Don't tell me you want Master to fight personally." Long Huaishan immediately fell silent. The reason why everyone was not willing to agree, other than because they cherished their disciples, was that the Hanyuan sect's power had decreased compared to the past. In the past, with the two Yuanying cultivators, Zhang Boyan and Song Chuyuan, in the sect, they would not be at a disadvantage even if they fought with the Python clan. But Zhang Boyan knew that his lifespan was coming to an end, so he had returned to the Donghua continent to reincarnate. As for Song Chuyuan, he was also at the end of his lifespan. Now, he was barely holding on to his life and was training his disciples in seclusion. He rarely showed himself. So this time, only Fu Baoxing, as the leader of a sect, could personally lead the disciples to help. At this moment, Fu Baoxing said, "We are in the Dongxing North Continent with Zhongtai sect. Behind us are the three sects, and in front of us is the Python clan. Only by working together can we have a foothold here. Both sects are bound together for good or bad. Whether we are willing or not, we need each other's help." He was everyone's master and also the leader of a sect. Since he said this, the disciples did not dare to have any objections. They all agreed. Fu Baoxing smiled and said, "Don't worry. I have already asked for help from the upper sect. Your two uncle masters have already agreed to help." When the disciples heard this, they could not help but let out a sigh of relief. All these years, the Python clan had repeatedly attacked Zhongtai sect, but they had never come to the Xinwu mountain. This was because the Hanyuan sect was backed by the Qinsang upper sect. Since there were people from the sect coming, then their previous worries were nothing. So they said, "We will listen to Master's orders." Fu Baoxing said, "Go back and make your own preparations. In a month's time at the latest, go with me to help Zhongtai sect." The 23 personal disciples stood up, bowed, and accepted the order. After Fu Baoxing finished his instructions, he waved his hand and dismissed the disciples, leaving only Long Huaishan behind. He called him to the rear hall and said, "Recently, the attacks on the Python clan are getting stronger and stronger. They seem to want to occupy a piece of land before the calamity. I think that the more it is so, the more we cannot let them get what they want." Not long ago, General Lu on the Sea found out that the Python clan's elder Luo Qiuhong will be heading to Xianyu Immortal City next month as a guest. But in actual fact, it is to guard the path of retreat, so that they can attack Zhongtai Immortal City with full force. I intend to take this chance to mobilize the disciples to ambush and kill him, cutting off one of the Python clan's arms. Then my Hanyuan sect will be temporarily stable. Long Huaishan was shocked and said, "Master, that Luo Qiuhong is a third-stage realm cultivator, he is Grand Master. I'm afraid it will not be easy to deal with him." Fu Baoxing said in a deep voice, "I know how powerful he is, so I will invite Senior Rui Ren to go with me, and invite the million people of the Lu family to follow. When the time comes, we will set up a large array, and your junior brothers and sisters will guard the array, gathering the power of the clan to kill this demon." He was very clear. The Python clan had many worries now. They were not too brazen, but if this carried on, the calamity would be nearing and they would not be able to hold it in. Since there would be a battle sooner or later. Rather than sit and wait, why not take the initiative to attack? Long Huaishan had some confidence and said, "If we have the help of two senior uncles, there is a huge possibility that we can kill this demon." Fu Baoxing shook his head. Although your two senior uncles have agreed to rush over to help, but the two continents are extremely far apart, they might not be able to rush over in time. When Long Huaishan heard this, he could not help but feel anxious. Fu Baoxing said, "Even though I am confident, it is hard to predict good or bad luck in a battle of sorcery. As the eldest disciple of the sect, you need to guard the sect. If I do not return, you will take over as the sect leader and guard the sect. In the future, your grandmaster will be in charge." Long Huaishan said guiltily, "I am useless. If my cultivation was a little deeper, I would be able to share master's burden." Fu Baoxing just smiled and gave a few more reminders before ordering him to leave. He returned to the back hall to meditate in seclusion, waiting for the time to come. Soon, a month passed. He came out of the temple and looked at the ocean. However, after waiting for a few days, he did not see anyone coming. On this day, Long Huaishan came to report, "Master, sect leader Qiao has sent a letter. 2 celestial cities on the continent are under attack, asking for our clan's assistance." Fu Baoxing said calmly, "Got it." At this time, he was actually calm. As long as this plan succeeded and the Python tribe was heavily injured, the situation in the North Continent could be reversed. No matter how much Xian Yu stole, he could make them spit it out in the future. However, after waiting for another half a day, there was still no sign of anyone on the ocean. At this time, Long Huaishan came to report again, "Master, General Lu has sent a letter. Luo Chilhong has brought more than 200 troops and is heading to Xian Yu Sect's celestial city on the sea." Fu Baoxing sighed. Although he had expected it, he still felt that it was a pity. Wang Kaiwei had the Yin Killer Blade in hand, coupled with the Array Formation and Dragon Carp Renren, it was very likely that she could kill him. Now, to be safe, he could only think of another way, so he said, "Invite Elder Song here." Not long after, Song Chuyuan arrived on the astral wind. After landing, he cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, sect leader Fu." Fu Baoxing looked at him and saw that his hair was already white. After all, his lifespan was coming to an end, and his cultivation was also gradually dissipating. He solemnly cupped his hands and said, "2 of my fellow disciples have not arrived yet. This time, I'm afraid I'll have to trouble Elder Song to help." Song Chuyuan said, "Sect leader Fu, you're too kind. You found me a disciple, and my corpse cult has a successor. My wish has been fulfilled, and I can reincarnate with peace of mind. Before I die, why don't I do something for the sect?" Fu Baoxing nodded repeatedly. Although Song Chuyuan's cultivation was not as good as before, he had the lifeless treasure coffin in hand. This was once the corpse cult's treasure, and it was extremely powerful. Back then, if he had not relied on this item to escape death, he would probably have died in the battle in the Devil's Cave like Tang Jin. And with the help of this treasure, even the Yin Killer Blade was not small. Beside him, Long Huaishan said, "Master, the junior brothers and sisters have arrived." Fu Baoxing replied, but just as he was about to call for his disciple and fly out to the sea, he suddenly heard the sound of landslides and tsunamis coming from behind him. He was startled and turned around to look, only to see that the sea was raging with violent winds and waves, and it was as if it was going to overturn the earth and shake the sky. Song Yuanchu's expression also changed. Even if the Yuanying cultivators went up rashly, they would not be able to withstand this kind of wind and waves. Fu Baoxing stared blankly for a long time. This kind of wind and waves came out of nowhere, and there were no signs beforehand, but it still had such power. There must be a powerful person behind it. And in the northern lands, the only person with such a cultivation base was the old demon Luomengza. He must have sensed that someone was going to harm his people, and that was why he did this. He originally thought that the people from the heavenly abode would not do anything due to their status, and that they had scruples about the Qinsang school behind him. But he never thought that there was no need for them to do anything at all. Just a huge wave would be enough to stop them on the shore, and all the previous plans and arrangements would be in vain. He felt the drops of water on his face, and slowly closed his eyes. He let out a long sigh. "Master, your disciple has tried his best. But at this moment, he suddenly heard a loud rumble, as if the heaven and earth were shaking. His body shook, and he opened his eyes to look, only to see a strange scene. A huge hand that almost covered the sky descended from the sky, wrapped in boundless astral currents, and pressed down the surging waves. Floating Astronomy. Chapter 927. Fu Baoxing couldn't help but be shocked when he saw the huge waves being calmed by a single palm. The person who used this technique had unbelievably high magic power. Needless to say, the other party must be a grotto heaven cultivator. He looked up and saw that behind the huge hand that seemed to support the sky, there was an obscure chaos. It was as if it was covered by thick fog, making it difficult to see what was behind it. He thought to himself, could it be that Tao Jinren is here? Thinking about it carefully, it was highly possible. The few grotto heaven cultivators of the South Continent were eager for the two sects to fight with the Python tribe so that they could reap the benefits. They wouldn't come to help. However, the technique in front of him was very similar to the mysterious yellow dragon capturing palm. Other than Tao Jinren, he couldn't think of anyone else. The disciples of the Deep Abyss sect looked at the monstrous power, and their hearts were filled with fear. Their cultivation was not considered weak among the cultivators in the world, but in the face of the power of this magical power that was close to the Wali of heaven and earth, they were like sand and dust. The person who stirred the waves seemed to not want to fight with the person who came. Once the waves were suppressed, the person stopped attacking, and the wind and clouds also calmed down. At this moment, the clouds in the sky slowly parted, and a handsome black-robed Taoist could be seen in midair. His sleeves fluttered in the wind, and below him was a mass of chaotic black fog. It was vast and indistinct, shapeless and formless, as if it was mixed in between heaven and earth. When Fu Baoxing saw the person who came, his body couldn't help but tremble. He slowly knelt down and kowtowed respectfully, saying with a trembling voice, "Disciple Fu Baoxing greets Master and wishes Master a long life." When Long Huaishan and the 22 disciples heard this, they realized that the person in front of them was their grandmaster. They hurriedly knelt down and said in unison, "Disciples of the Deep Abyss sect greets Grandmaster and wishes Grandmaster a long life." Zhang Yan looked down and nodded, saying, "Get up." Fu Baoxing kowtowed again before he stood up and said, "Disciple did not know that benefactor would arrive and was unable to welcome you from afar. Please punish me, benefactor." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I also sensed the change in this world, so I used my magic power to teleport here. That Luo Mengzi is playing tricks in front of my door. Perhaps he had to go and meet them for a while. Whatever you want to do, just do it. There's no need to care about anything else." With that said, he waved his sleeve. There was a loud bang. The black mist in the sky rose again. It surged towards the surface of the sea. Fu Baoxing hurriedly bowed to send him off. After a long time, Long Huaishan asked cautiously, "Master, has Grandmaster entered the grotto heaven realm?" Fu Baoxing turned around. Seeing the looks of anticipation on the faces of his disciples, he nodded his head. When the disciples saw this, their faces were filled with indescribable excitement. A Taoist heavenly abode could decide the rise and fall of a sect. Their own grandmaster was a Taoist heavenly abode, which meant that he could go anywhere in the world. Apart from those enemies of life and death, few people would dare to make things difficult for him. His future path of cultivation would be much wider than that of others. Fu Baoxing looked calm on the surface, but his heart was actually very excited. However, there was still something to do, so it was not the time to be happy. He suppressed his emotions and said, "With Master's appearance, Luo Mengzi should have no time to care about other things. This is a rare opportunity. Pass down my order, the disciples of the Deep Abyss sect will follow me to kill the Python tribe's elder, Luo Qiuhong." All the disciples agreed, and their voices soared into the sky. In the Deep Abyss sect, streaks of light flew up from the cliff and gathered in one place, flying towards Xianyu Immortal City. When Zhang Yan arrived at the surface of the sea, he used his magic power to teleport. In just an instant, he arrived on the island where the Python tribe was entrenched. The place where the Python tribe was entrenched was originally the palace of the celestial Civ sect. After hundreds of years of operation, they moved mountains and built land. They had already opened up thousands of small and large islands, scattered all over the sea. There were also formations and restrictions connecting each other. Not only were there members of the Python tribe, but there were also many sea demons who heard of their prestige and came from afar to attach themselves to them. Now, there were no less than 1 million of them, and their momentum was also very strong. He took a look and gently shook his sleeve. In an instant, the sky darkened, and the sun and moon disappeared. In the sky, there was a cloud of black fog rolling, spreading for thousands of miles. Within it, there was dense thunder and lightning flashed back and forth. Demon cultivators were most afraid of thunder. Seeing this scene, it was like the arrival of a heavenly tribulation, and all of them trembled. Taoist heavenly abode, Qinsang Zhang Yan is here to visit, please come out for a while. This voice spread far and wide, and could be heard by the land and sea. Taoist heavenly abode, it's actually a Taoist heavenly abode. The people below panicked, and the few elders of the Python tribe were so shocked that their faces turned pale. To be able to create such a world-changing scene, only Taoist heavenly abode could do it. After a moment, they heard a voice on the island, and it also spread for thousands of miles. Taoist Zhang is a guest from afar, so I will naturally come out to welcome you. After a short while, they saw black smoke rising from the island, and it went straight into the sky like a tornado. From it, a middle-aged Taoist wearing a wide robe came out. This person's long eyebrows were raised, and his beard fluttered in front of his chest. His face was handsome, and he was the Python tribe's old ancestor, Luomengza, whom they had met once before. He came up to greet Zhang Yan and said, I didn't expect that after hundreds of years, Taoist Zhang is indeed one of us. As expected of the rare genius that Qinsang sees in thousands of years. Zhang Yan returned the greeting and said, Taoist heavenly abode, you flatter me. I don't think I'm a genius, but sometimes, I dare to fight. Luomengza was about to speak again, but at this moment, he suddenly frowned, as if he felt something was wrong. He said, Taoist Zhang, you are the Shangjin of the Qinsang School's Duzhen Hall, why are you making things difficult for a junior? Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, I don't dare. Taoist Jinren respected me before, so I should return the favor. This is etiquette. Luomengza snorted, and a hint of anger rose in his heart. Although he tried his best to avoid fighting with the Taoist heavenly abode, he was blocked in front of the door, and he couldn't save his own people. If he didn't do something, not only would he lose face, he was afraid that anyone would dare to bully him in the future. He raised his hand and pointed to the sky, and said, since Taoist Zhang is interested, then I will accompany you. However, I can't stretch my limbs here, why don't we go outside the heavens? Zhang Yan smiled and said, sure. The two of them looked at each other and leaped up into the sky. In an instant, 2 vast streams of clear water shot up into the clouds. Outside the second heaven, Luomengza stopped in his tracks. He said, Taoist Zhang, sorry. His body swayed, and with a rumbling sound, a Dharma idol rose from behind him. Endless black clouds spread out and filled the air, covering a radius of more than 3,000 miles. A horned, black-scaled serpent slithered back and forth in the clouds, stirring up lightning from time to time. There were also thousands of golden snakes following the clouds, looking extremely ferocious. Zhang Yan smiled. Luomengza was indeed called an old demon. On the surface, he spoke politely, but at this moment, he didn't show any mercy in the battle. One must know that once a cultivator entered the grotto heaven, they would become a breath of essence. This breath was formed from the cultivator's cultivation, mana, and true essence. It was the foundation of the grotto heaven cultivators. The essence would not be extinguished. The cultivation would not be reduced. The mana would not be reduced, and life would not be lost. If the essence disappeared, not only would one's cultivation be unable to advance, it might even disappear. When one used their mana, they would need to rely on this energy. If they used up too much, they would have to carefully replenish it. In other words, the more essence one had, the stronger one's mana and abilities would be. If one wanted to maintain this energy, they could only rely on the spiritual cave to support it. Because of this, if normal people didn't have a spiritual cave, it would be hard for their cultivation to increase, and it would be hard for their abilities to be displayed. Luo Mengzi was taking advantage of the fact that he had just entered the grotto heaven and his essence energy was still weak. He wanted to use his dharma to suppress him. Zhang Yan looked at the python charging at him, but he didn't fear it at all. The essence energy might be treasured by other grotto heaven cultivators and they wouldn't dare to waste it. However, he was different. He had reached the Tao and didn't have such worries. To him, this place was a spiritual cave. With a thought, he displayed his dharma. In an instant, a ball of Xian mist rose up and spread for 10,000 miles. It headed forward without retreating at all. Hung Long. In the sky above the entire Dongshin continent, there was a loud noise that sounded like it was splitting the sky. Even though they were fighting outside the heavens, the cultivators in the continent felt their minds shaking, and their spiritual opportunity almost couldn't be controlled. After a while, there were countless gales, lightning, snow, and hail in the sky. In an instant, the 4 seasons were in chaos, and it was hard to tell the difference between day and night. At this moment, the expressions of the 3 grotto heavens people who were sitting in the south continent changed. They couldn't sit still anymore and flew into the sky. Fengxiang Sec's grotto heavens gone shouting's expression was ugly. How can the 2 of you fight here? If this goes on, it will ruin Dongsheng's spiritual opportunity. He cupped his hands at the other 2 grotto heavens Jinren and said, why don't the 2 of you go with me to persuade them? The other 2 nodded in agreement. If the grotto heavens Jinren didn't care and attacked, it would turn the world upside down and the continent would collapse. This was their place of cultivation, and they didn't want people to mess around like this. Although Zhang Yan and Luo Mengzi were still fighting above the clouds, if they really fought, it would be hard to deal with. The 3 of them also flew above the heavens, but they didn't dare to get too close. They just raised their eyes and looked into the distance. They were afraid that if they went forward rashly, they would cause the other party to misunderstand and get involved. If that happened, it would be hard to clean up. At this moment, they were shocked to find that the python's scales had fallen off, and half of the horns on its head were broken. It looked a little pathetic. On the other hand, the black fog was getting stronger, and it looked like it was going to wrap around it. Gan Shouting was afraid that if the fight continued, he would persuade them again, so he quickly said loudly, Jinren, please calm down. It's not easy for us to cultivate, and it won't benefit anyone if we continue to fight like this. We'll let others take advantage of us, don't you think so? As if his words were effective, the python's dharma shook and returned to its original appearance. It then retracted, and Luo Mengzi's figure appeared. He said solemnly, what do you say, Jinren Zhang? Just now, he had underestimated Zhang Yan's ability and lost the game. Although he knew that if he continued to fight, he would not necessarily lose, but if he continued to pester Zhang Yan, he would be looked down upon by his fellow Taoists. Now that he had a way out, he simply stopped. Zhang Yan also slowly retracted his dharma and smiled. I have no objections. He had achieved his goal today, so he naturally stopped while he was ahead. It wasn't easy to kill a Grotto Heaven's Shinran, especially after reaching the 2nd level of Grotto Heaven. Those with profound magic power could open up a Grotto Heaven, and if they couldn't defeat their opponent, they could hide inside. Let's not talk about this. Once he falls into a dead end, he can still collapse the continent and make all living beings accompany him in death. Even though he can be unharmed, he may not be able to protect his disciples. Until the time comes to shed all pretense of cordiality, he is not prepared to force him into a dead end. Chapter 928. Above the outer sea of Dongshin continent, the million demons of the Lu clan had already formed the 6 return formation. The 23 disciples of the Deep Abyss school were guarding the eyes of the formation. They gathered the chi of the formation, turned it into lightning, and struck the Python clan in the formation. Luo Qihong was extremely shocked and furious as well. At first, when Fu Baoxing and Song Chuyuan came to challenge him, not only was he not shocked, he was instead secretly delighted in his heart. He even intended to eliminate these two nascent soul realm cultivators from the Deep Abyss sect in one battle and sweep away the obstacles for the Python tribe to get on the mainland. However, when he activated the Heaven and Earth Lock technique, Dragon Carp, who was hiding at the side, used her mana to neutralize it. Then, Fu Baoxing and Song Chuyuan held him back. When he realized something was wrong, he was already trapped by the formation. It was difficult for him to escape. Seeing the clansmen around him being killed one by the thunder fire, fear rose in his heart. If he didn't break out, it was very likely that he would follow in their footsteps. Thus, he threatened, Fu Baoxing, if you dare to kill the disciples of my Python clan, will the ancestor let you go? Fu Baoxing was unmoved. This was just a fight between the younger generation. The people of the heavenly abode would not interfere. Blocking them like before was already the limit. If he fought personally, then the Qinsang school behind him would not be a decoration. Moreover, with his master, there was no need for him to worry. So, he ignored them and said, disciples of the Deep Abyss school, don't be stingy with your mana. Kill this demon with all your might. The 23 disciples agreed in unison. They took out the medicinal pellets they had prepared and consumed them. Then, they increased the power of the formation. Just like that, the lightning in the formation became even more violent, like a downpour. Luo Qiuhong took off his cloak and threw it in the air. He then chanted a spell, and the cloak grew bigger and bigger until it covered him and his people. Demon General Lu Changsu was on the altar with Fu Baoxing. He watched for a while and suggested, Sect Leader Fu, this old demon is not easy to deal with. He is also a demon from the Python clan. He must have brought some powerful protective treasures with him, but I don't see him using them. He must still be thinking of breaking out of the formation. This lowly demon thinks that it's better to keep his disciples and grand-disciples alive so that they can hold him back. Fu Baoxing nodded repeatedly and said, General Lu is right. I was negligent. Even if those little demons escaped, it wouldn't affect the overall situation. On the contrary, keeping them around will make it impossible for the demon to escape. He immediately accepted this suggestion. Then, they spread the news on the altar. When the disciples received the order, they immediately shifted all the pressure onto Luo Qiuhong, while the rest of the small demons only surrounded him. But he didn't kill him. Luo Qiuhong was in the middle of the formation, so it was difficult for him to notice such a change. He thought that it was because of his family's defense. However, he had to split his attention to take care of the younger generation while resisting the invasion of the formation's qi. His transcendence energy was greatly depleted, so it did not take long for him to feel exhausted. He couldn't be bothered to hide his trump card anymore. He opened his mouth and spat out a blood-red pearl. The moment the blood qi from the pearl came into contact with it, it was immediately stripped away layer by layer. When Fu Baoxing saw it, he exclaimed in surprise, 5 confusion dust beads. Disciples, be careful of your defense. At the same time, he felt fortunate and thought to himself, luckily I trapped this demon here, or else Zhongtai would be in danger this time. The 5 confusion dust beads were not some ultimate treasure. Any cultivator could use it as a sacrificial offering if they had enough precious materials. The power of this item was that it could be dispersed and combined at will. When dispersed, it could infiltrate the formation and contaminate the spiritual vigor. However, if the filthy qi gathered at one place and poured out in an instant, it would have the power to break the formation. The Python demon must have brought this item with him to break the formation of Zhongtai Immortal City. Lu Changsu saw that the formation was dissipating under the pearl, and it seemed like it could not be stopped. She said, Sect Master Fu, why don't I go down and help the Erlangs? Fu Baoxing shook his head and said, there's no hurry. I wanted to find a chance to kill this demon, but now it has come to me. There was a saying in the common military, surround 3 to 1. Although he did not purposely let it go, the principle was the same. This demon saw that there was a way out and would only run away without a care in the world. Instead, it would lose its will to fight. Then, their chance would come. He turned around and bowed to Song Chuyuan, who was standing at the side, and said, "Thank you, Jinren Song." Song Chuyuan did not dare to say anything. He took out the corpse cult's treasure, the lifeless treasure coffin, and threw it into the sky. The coffin emitted endless black smoke out of thin air, which then turned into chains. With a clanging sound, it went towards Luo Qiuhong. When this treasure was in good condition, it should be able to circle the sky and lock down the 4 directions. Now, it could only lock down one place, but it was enough to deal with this big demon who only cared about rushing in. Luo Qiuhong saw that the smoke chains were closing in. If he retreated, then the formation chi that was previously broken would definitely recover. He hesitated for a moment, then activated his protective light, allowing the chains to come down and trap him, but he still desperately tried to drill forward. However, not long after, he felt his whole body go limp. The true essence in his body was being sucked out bit by bit. However, this thing was strange. He immediately roared and changed his original form, turning into a giant black-scaled python that was hundreds of feet long, and slammed forward again. With a bang, a small corner of the formation was broken by him, and half of his body came out. He was about to escape. Fu Baoxing, however, was not in a hurry. This formation was a living formation. As long as he could stall this demon for a moment, he could trap it again. Sure enough, Luo Qiuhong struggled a few times, but he could not completely escape. However, with this delay, the formation gradually closed up again. Fu Baoxing saw the opportunity. With a sword sign in his hand, he activated Thousand Snatches sword chi, borrowing the mystery of the formation, and pointed forward. Where the sword light passed, the python's head was immediately cut off. The disciples were overjoyed, and they could not help but feel relieved. However, Fu Baoxing felt that the sword did not have the slightest chi, so he immediately knew something was wrong. He said, "Don't let your guard down." As soon as he finished speaking, the python exploded, and its flesh and blood scattered everywhere, forcing the formation chi away. At the same time, a red light flew out, and a voice said, "Fu Baoxing, I will definitely take revenge in the future." Lu Changsu said, "Oh no, it's his avatar that escaped." Fu Baoxing frowned, and he was about to fly out to kill it. However, right at this moment, a ray of gray light suddenly flew out of nowhere and sliced the red light into 2. Then, the gray chi stirred again and completely wiped out the red light. Fu Baoxing was a little surprised. The gray gas dispersed, and an elegant woman in a light white dress came out. She looked like a jade lotus, and she stood on the strong wind. When he saw her, he could not help but be overjoyed. He bowed and said, "Thank you for your help, third senior sister." Wang Kaiwei said, "You don't have to be so polite." At that moment, a woman in a red dress came out from behind her. She snorted and pretended to be unhappy. "Junior brother, you thanked me, but why didn't you thank me? To think that I always looked after you in the past." Fu Baoxing quickly bowed again and said, "So fourth senior sister is here too. Please forgive me for not seeing you." Wang Kaiwei tugged at her sister's sleeve and rebuked, "Sister, you should change your habit of teasing people. Junior brother Fu is now a sect master. You should take care of him in front of others." Wang Kading giggled and said, "Sister is right." Wang Kaiwei said apologetically, "Junior brother Fu, when I came with sister, we encountered a few carp demons. We were afraid that business would get out of hand. Therefore, we took a detour. However, we were late. May I know if we delayed your business?" Fu Baoxing said, "Senior sister is being too serious. If not for the 2 senior sisters, I wouldn't have been able to do anything. If not for the 2 of you, I would have had to spend some effort today. However, since the 2 of you are here, there is something I need to tell you." Wang Kaiwei saw his serious look and stopped smiling. She asked, "Junior brother, please speak." Fu Baoxing cupped his hands towards the north and said, "Benefactor's Dharma carriage is here." Wang Kaiwei was pleasantly surprised. "My teacher is with you?" Wang Keting also widened her beautiful eyes. Fu Baoxing said seriously, yes. Wang Kaiwei calmed herself down and said, since master is here, sister, we need to go and greet him as soon as possible. Fu Baoxing said, master is probably fighting with old monster Luo on the sea right now. Master is fighting with old monster Luo? The two girls were shocked and immediately came to their senses. Wang Kaiwei said with a trembling voice, Master has become a grotto heaven. Wang Keting muttered to herself, yes, yes. She grabbed Wang Caiwei's arm and shook it hard. Sister, do you remember the noise on the sea just now? I think master is fighting with old monster Luo. Wang Kaiwei was worried and said, Luo Mengzi is a powerful demon who has cultivated for more than 2,000 years. I wonder if master can defeat him. Fu Baoxing called the younger disciples up and greeted the two girls one by one. He then said, the sea is not a good place to talk. Senior sisters, why don't you follow me back to the mountain first? The two sisters had no objections. They worked together and returned to Tsangzhu Peak after traveling for half a day. However, after waiting for 6 days, Zhang Yan did not return for a long time. Everyone could not help but worry. On the 7th day, a stream of chaotic mystic qi crossed the sea from the horizon and almost covered the sky. Fu Baoxing knew that Zhang Yan had returned and quickly led all the disciples out to welcome him. After Zhang Yan forced Luo Mengzi to retreat, he accepted the invitation of the 3 grotto heavens of the 3 southern sects and rode on a ritual implement to discuss Tao beyond the sky. That was why he was delayed for a few days. After receiving the greetings of many juniors outside the mountain, he entered the main hall and sat down. Seeing that the Wang sisters were also there, he asked about the current situation in Donghua. Wang Kaiwei said, Master, after you left, there were not many changes in the continent. However, not long ago, there was a leak of spiritual vigor from a crypt in the continent. It was in the south, and the only sect that was close to it was Yuxiao's. I'm afraid that our Xuanma and Xuanma families will fight again soon. Zhang Yan nodded slightly. With his current cultivation, although the battle of the demonic crypt was intense, it was not a big deal to him. He was happy to win and not worried about losing. There was only the last trial. Just now was the time to determine the winner. He asked a few more questions and learned that Qi Yuntian had already formed a grotto heaven. He could not help but exclaim, Senior brother Qi's cultivation base is outstanding among your peers. Forming a grotto heaven is only a matter of time. He looked at Fu Baoxing and said gently, Disciple, you have been guarding the cult of Deep Abyss for 300 years. Are you willing to follow me back to Donghua? When Fu Baoxing heard this, he could not help but hesitate. Of course, he was willing. Not only could he get guidance from his master, but he could also cultivate in the grotto heaven. It was much better than managing the affairs of the sect in Dongxing continent every day. However, after thinking about it, he realized that Song Chuyuan would be reincarnated soon. He was the only Yuanian cultivator in the cult of Deep Abyss to support the overall situation. If he went just like that, it would be difficult to guard the sect. The prosperity of the sect was the result of hundreds of years of hard work. It was not something that could be abandoned easily. He could only say, Master, I'm afraid I can't leave. Zhang Yan smiled and said in a meaningful tone, I know what you are thinking. There's no harm in it. When you are done with your worldly affairs, throw away your worries, that will be the time you enter the sect. Chapter 929. Zhang Yan stayed in East Victory for half a month and taught the disciples of Hanyuan's sect many important cultivation techniques. Then, under Fu Baoxing's respectful farewell, he brought the Wang sisters and left the continent on the dragon carriage. If he traveled at his usual speed, it would take at least a few months to return to Donghua. However, with the help of his dermic powers, the carriage did not descend from the lightning and stars. In just over 10 days, it had reached the far sea of the East Ocean. Seeing that it would not take more than half a day to reach the territory of the Clear Feather sect, he thought about how he had been taken care of by Tao Jinren previously. Since he was passing by, he decided to pay a visit. He raised his hand and pointed, conjuring a talisman book. Zhang Chan, take my book and go to the Clear Feather sect. The people of the grotto heaven walked with great momentum. If they did not conceal it, it would be like lighting a fire in the dark. It would not be difficult for cultivators of the same generation to notice. It was just out of etiquette to pass the message. Zhang Chan took the book, bowed, and escaped with a gust of wind. However, he didn't go far when he saw a huge golden river in the clouds. He didn't find it strange, but when he looked carefully, he saw that there were countless golden carps swimming in it. They were heading in the same direction as him. He turned his eyes and shouted at one of the golden carps, "Fellow Taoist, please wait." The golden carp looked at him in confusion. It turned around and turned into a charming woman. She asked, "Fellow Taoist, what can I do for you?" Zhang Chan bowed and asked, "I passed by this place and saw your great momentum. I wonder where you are going." The woman did not seem to be scheming. She said honestly, "My king found a good spiritual field in the sea. He wants to occupy it first so that the Xian family won't get it." Zhang Chan said, "Is your king Patriarch Chu?" The woman covered her mouth and smiled. She said, "I don't have that blessing." Soon after, he realized that these words seemed to be belittling his master, so he hurriedly restrained his expression and said, "My king is one of the 100 grandchildren of the ancestor, and he's called Immortal Yitong. He likes to make friends with people of the same Tao. If fellow Taoist is interested in joining him, I can introduce you to him." Zhang Chan asked a few more questions and understood that once the Carp tribe's royal grandson reached the Yuanying stage, he would be able to break through to the Yuanying stage. He needed to bring his family members to open the mansion. Sit and guard a region. In the hundreds of years since he came to the sea, he had already occupied many places where spiritual opportunity flourished. He asked doubtfully, "I heard that there are 2 clans here, Chongyue and Qingyu, and they aren't our demonic cultivators. Could it be that they're allowing your clan to take whatever they want?" The woman said, "So fellow Taoist didn't know." Mizhenren of the Chongyuezhen temple was nearing the end of his lifespan. How would he dare to come out at this time? As for the Clear Feather sect, although Tao Zhenhong was quite capable, his disciples were not. "How can you compete with my Carp tribe?" When she mentioned the Clear Feather sect, her tone was filled with disdain. Zhang Chan conversed with the woman for a while more and got a token from her. Then, he found an excuse to leave and took a big detour to avoid the Carp tide before heading to the Clear Feather sect. Previously, he had followed Zhang Yan to this place. Based on his memory, he realized that after flying for a long time, he kept circling around a reef. He knew that he had entered a formation, so he didn't dare to move around recklessly anymore. He only shouted, "Is there any Taoist from the Clear Feather sect here? I'm here on the order of Immortal Zhang of Qinsong to deliver the visiting card." Not long after he said that, the sea suddenly parted, and a young cultivator came out with a puff of smoke. He looked at Zhang Chan suspiciously and said, "Are you from the Qinsong school? Please wait for a moment, I'll send a talisman to report to the sect." At this moment, a voice came from behind him. "There's no need. Just give me the book." The young cultivator turned around and saw a middle-aged Taoist holding a horsetail whisk behind him. He hurriedly bowed and greeted, "Martial uncle." The middle-aged Taoist nodded and took the book. "Since it's a letter from Immortal Zhang, I'll personally deliver it to the sect master." Zhang Chan also said, "Then I'll have to trouble you, Taoist. I can go back and report to the sect master now." The middle-aged Taoist's mouth moved, and he passed a formation incantation to him. "Fly according to this incantation, and Taoist will be able to leave this formation. It's just that Carp Demon has been causing trouble everywhere recently, and the sea isn't too safe. Please be careful when you travel." Zhang Chan thanked him and followed the incantation to get out of the formation. He returned the way he came. Although he met a few patrolling demon cultivators along the way, with the token in hand, there were no more obstacles along the way. Not long after, he returned to the Flood Dragon's carriage. He reported what he saw and said, "Master, I see that Clear Feather sect is about to be bullied by the Carp tribe. I'm afraid the situation isn't good." Zhang Yan smiled and said, Only when the predecessors plant the trees can the descendants enjoy the shade. Tao Xinren is the one who planted the trees. Chongyue True Temple has been established for thousands of years, and its foundation is deep. The Python tribe has a lot of people, and they're born with the Water tribe. It won't be easy for them to snatch the spiritual opportunity from these two tribes. Don't use the current situation to determine victory or defeat. After a few hundred years, we'll see who wins. Wang Kading whispered, Sister thinks that after a few hundred years, Clear Feather sect will be the winner. Wang Kaiwei was surprised. Sister, how dare you say that? Wang Kading said proudly, Tao Xinren's lifespan is less than 1,000 years. The two Chongyue True Temples Mi Xinren and the Carp tribe's old demon Chu are both more than 2,000 years old. If we wait any longer, the winner will be Clear Feather sect. When Zhang Yan heard their conversation, he just shook his head and smiled. On the surface, as long as Clear Feather sect endured for a while, they would be able to get out of their predicament after a few hundred years. However, how could the two spiritual masters not see this? They would definitely make arrangements early. If that happened, they would either have to relocate their sect or go through with it. Moreover, one must not forget that the 9 continents were still in the midst of a great tribulation. The last tribulation was even more dangerous. Even the people from the heavenly abode would not be able to do anything about it. If Clear Feather sect could get through it, they would naturally turn into butterflies. If they couldn't, they would be in danger of being destroyed. At this moment, in Clear Feather sect, Tao Xinren had already received Zhang Yan's letter. He summoned his 4th disciple, Yang Lin, and said, Qinsang School's spiritual master Zhang is visiting our sect. Pass down my order. Open the mountain gate, and I will personally welcome him. Yang Lin said, Master is the leader of a sect, so it's not good to act rashly. Why don't I go and welcome him? Tao Xinren shook his head and said, Fellow Taoist Zhang is now one of us, and he's also in charge of Qinsang School's Duzhen Palace, so he deserves this greeting. Yang Lin's heart trembled, and he said in disbelief, Spiritual Master Zhang. Could it be that you formed a heavenly abode? Tao Xinren nodded slowly. He was also deeply moved, and he thought to himself, fellow Taoist Zhang has formed a heavenly abode after cultivating for 500 years. Since ancient times, there has never been anyone who can surpass him in our 9 continents. Yang Lin forced himself to calm down. He stood up and said, Disciple will make arrangements now. Not long after, Clear Feather sect's mountain gates restrictive formation was opened. On both sides of the Dao path, maids rode cranes forward, and the steps were lined up to welcome them. There was even a cover of brilliant clouds, and celestial lamps were raised high. Golden threads and silver flowers weaved the Dao of brocade clouds. After a while, sect master Tao Xinhong led the disciples out on the palace boat. For a moment, clear air covered the sun, and clouds moved with the wind. When he saw a flood dragon carriage coming over, he stood up first and cupped his hands. Fellow Taoist Zhang, long time no see. Why don't you come on the boat? Zhang Yan returned the greeting and said with a smile, Since it's master's invitation, how would I dare to decline? He came out of the flood dragon carriage, rode the wind, and sat on the palace boat. He looked around and saw that even though the number of Clear Feather sect disciples had increased by more than 10 times, as far as he could see, there was only one Yuanying cultivator, Yang Lin. Zhao Jingcheng and Wang Yingfang were nowhere to be seen. There had never been a reason for a disciple to stay away when a master came out to welcome a guest. Calculating the years, the two of them had most likely reached the end of their lifespan and reincarnated. There was no successor among the younger generation, so it was no wonder that they were suppressed by the other 2 sections. Tao Xinren saw that Zhang Yan was paying attention to the disciples, so he said, Our Clear Feather sect has only been established for a short time, and there are few who can take charge. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said with a smile, Tao Xinren, it's hard to get here today. Why don't you invite me Xinren and Demon Lord Chu over for a chat? When Tao Xinren heard this, his expression changed slightly. He thought for a while and sighed. I owe you another favor. It was true that he was a heavenly abode master, but after rebelling against the South Flower sect, he was isolated on the ocean without the support of a sect. This meant that unless it was a matter of life and death, he could not act rashly. In the past, when he helped Zhang Yan many times, he also had the intention of befriending Qinsong. Today, however, Zhang Yan's identity was very different. He was originally the side hall master of Qinsong School's Duzhen Hall. Now that he had achieved a heavenly abode, he would definitely take the position of the main hall when he returned. This position was not to be underestimated. In terms of authority, it was only below the Qinsong sect master, and only the Dikong Hall master could be on par with him. Now, as long as he showed that he wanted to take care of them, Carp Tribe and Chongyue True Temple would definitely be afraid, and they would not press on like before. This favor was not small, and it was extremely beneficial to Clear Feather sect, so he had to accept it. However, he did not know when he would be able to repay the 3 favors he promised to help Zhang Yan with. Zhang Yan shook his sleeves, and between his fingers, 2 talisman books floated in the air. He called 2 flood dragons over and ordered them to send them to Chongyue True Temple and Carp Tribe. Gong Zhou soon entered the mountain gate. Tao Xinren was also carefree, and he let the restriction formation be open. The 2 of them exchanged a few words, and it was inevitable that they would talk about Donghua. Tao Xinren said, "In these 100 years, there were 2 clear qi in Donghua. One came from your sect, and the other from Yuxiao. From the surface, there were 2 Taoists who achieved a heavenly abode. As for the other sects, if they tried to cover it up, we would not know." Zhang Yan nodded in agreement. After he entered the heavenly abode realm, he understood many things that he did not understand in the past. For example, when a cultivator achieved a heavenly abode, if there was an elder who intentionally covered it up, or hid in a small world and did not come out, then the momentum of the cultivator's achievement might not be noticed by others. In the current Devil's Calamity, there was no guarantee that there would not be descendants of the Devil's sect who achieved this realm. However, a Taoist heavenly abode needed to breathe essence and circulate spiritual opportunity. After a long time, it would definitely not be hidden. Although it was not clear now, it would not be difficult to find out in the future. As the 2 of them were talking, they felt something at the same time. They looked towards the southeast and saw a dharma rising from the horizon. There was a golden carp with claws under its abdomen and horns on its head. It had the shape of a dragon, and its golden light was dazzling, faintly discernible in the clouds. At the same time, a pure white cold chi rose from the northwest. There was a jade drum hidden in it, and it had a pair of wings. As it fluttered, there was a rustling sound. These 2 dharma, one in the south and the other in the north, resonated with each other, and shook the sky. Most of the Clear Feather sect disciples did not have high cultivation, so they were all distracted. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed. These 2 people should have received his message, but they did not attend the banquet. Instead, they displayed their dharma, which showed that they were dissatisfied, and there was a hidden intention to weigh him. If it was somewhere else, as long as they did not provoke him, he would just laugh it off. However, his intention was to help his fellow Taoists, so he naturally had to agree. He smiled, and with a shake of his body, a qi of Xian floated into the air, and in an instant, it was as tall as the sky, filling up the sky. Chapter 930. The moment Zhang Yan's dharma appeared, it filled up the universe. The waves of the sea, the sun, and the moon couldn't be seen. It was as if it had returned to the beginning of the mysteries of the heavens, when all things were about to be born. The other 2 dharma images were pressured and their auras weakened slightly. As the chi of chaos expanded, they were gradually forced back to a corner of the world. The one in the northwest saw that it was hard to turn back, so it didn't persist and retreated. Only the one in the southeast seemed to be unwilling and still persisted. However, it was hard to hold on alone, and after a moment, it retreated helplessly. That dharma image slowly descended from the sky and returned to the peak of an island. In the end, a person wearing a royal robe and a crown appeared. He had a majestic aura like that of an emperor. It was Chu Yu, the old ancestor of the Carp tribe. He looked at the Xianyu Dharma image in the sky and revealed a look of envy. He sighed and said, "The righteous path of Xianmen is indeed extraordinary. Even though this Zhang Jinren has just entered the heavenly abode, he has surpassed us." Beside him stood an abnormally tall and sturdy cultivator. He had a short mustache and his eyes were spirited. He was over 10 feet tall and said indignantly, "If not for that Mi Jinren leaving first, old ancestor might have been able to suppress him." Chu Yu scoffed and said with disdain, "Chongyue True Temple only has what it has today because of the legacy of a few great figures of Xianmen. Now that thousands of years have passed, the blessings of the predecessors are about to be used up. The calamity is coming, and once Mi Jinren leaves, it will be hard for them to protect themselves. Why would they be willing to offend Qinsang School too deeply? Retreating is also expected. Today, we are just testing out that Zhang Jinren's methods." The sturdy cultivator was slightly anxious and said, "Old ancestor, since Tao Zhenhong has colluded with Qinsang School, doesn't that mean we can't use the usual methods to deal with him?" Chu Yu nodded and said, "This Zhang Jinren has many disciples. We can't use the usual methods anymore. In a while, you can go down and pass down the order. In the future, if there is no need, don't go against Clear Feather Sect." The cultivator was even more anxious and said, "Then wouldn't all our previous efforts have been for nothing?" Chu Yu, on the other hand, had a card up his sleeve as he smiled and said, "How could that be? Qinsang was powerful, but it would at most restrain itself a little in the future. In the past few centuries, Donghua's spiritual opportunity had changed, and the turbidity had disappeared. This situation was very disadvantageous to the celestial sect of wonders. It's the same on the sea. Tao Zhenhong won't be able to do anything. He's just waiting for me and old me to run out of lifespan. I have other ways to deal with it." The muscular cultivator opened his mouth. He revealed an expression of wanting to ask but not daring to. Chu Yu was still looking at the sky. "Chu Fang, you've already cultivated to perfection of the fourth transformation, right?" Chu Fang replied, "Exactly." However, as soon as he said this, he revealed a somewhat gloomy expression. He was also aware that he could no longer advance after reaching this level of cultivation. Unlike his brothers in the clan, although the path to the heavenly abode was extremely difficult, at least they had not reached the end of their path. Chu Yu looked into his eyes and said, "Among my 100 grandchildren, your aptitude is the best. Back then, you let all my brothers enter the Qi path, but only you were allowed to walk the strength path. Did you ever resent me?" Chu Fang hurriedly knelt on the ground and kowtowed repeatedly. "Old ancestor is wise, grandson has never thought that way." Chu Yu laughed and said, If you really resent me, it will definitely create a knot in your heart. Even with the help of heavenly materials and earthly treasures, you won't be able to cultivate to this level. Get up." Only then did Chu Fang stand up. Chu Yu sighed and said, "The reason why I let you choose this method is because the Qi path is a human cultivation method, it is not suitable for my clan." Chu Fang was slightly puzzled and said, "But didn't old ancestors say that the heaven demon's blood essence has been cut off? Although the strength path is good, it is difficult to reach the great Tao. Now, only the Qi path is the foundation of the world." Chu Yu said solemnly, "That's right, back then when we changed to the Qi path, our 8 divisions benefited greatly from it. But just now you have seen it, that Jinren Zhang has just formed the heavenly abode, but he has already suppressed my 1,000 years of cultivation. A few days ago, fellow Taoist Luo even sent me a letter to be careful of this person. I think I also suffered a great loss." "Why is that?" "That is because he is from the orthodox Xianmen, entering the Tao as a human. Walking this path together, he is innately superior to us demon cultivators. Just like thousands of years ago, the Qinsang school's 12 heavenly abodes beat up our 8 divisions to the point that we were unable to fight back. After that, many of our disciples would rather die than return to the clan, all for the sake of reincarnating as a human, hoping that they would be fated to enter the Xianmen path in their next life." When Chu Fang heard these words, his face flushed red. He clenched his fists tightly and said with extreme dissatisfaction, Could it be that our clan is being oppressed and humiliated by Xianmen like this?" Chu Yu's expression turned serious. He took a step forward and grabbed his shoulder, saying seriously, "Of course not. As long as you can cultivate to the 5th stage of strength transformation, you can turn this around." Chu Feng couldn't help but be stunned. He stuttered, "Old ancestor, grandson, grandson, grandson." Chu Yu sighed inwardly. Back then, he had chosen this grandson because he liked his simple, honest, and obedient nature. And these few years, because he was afraid that outsiders would notice some clues from his cultivation, he had not let him go out to train, causing his temperament to be a little unstable. But as long as the plan succeeded, these were nothing. Instead, it would be beneficial to the clan. So he said, "Don't panic. Since I said this, I naturally have a way." Chu Feng couldn't help but open his mouth wide. Chu Yu smiled and said, "Don't not believe me. You should have heard that when our Chu clan occupied one of the 3 pools, the Surging Waves Lake, we already knew that there was a Blue Dragon Manor below. It was just that it was personally suppressed by the founder of the Qinsang clan, Reverend Tai Ming. We couldn't find the key to it and couldn't break the seal. Later on, the Su clan obtained this place and secretly lifted the seal. But before they could obtain this item, Qin Mabai acted prematurely and killed the entire clan. But that manor was moved to another place by the Su clan with the help of a treasure." Chu Feng's eyes widened and said, "Could it be that old ancestor has found the whereabouts of this manor?" Chu Yu said, "All these years, I have constantly sent my clansmen to investigate. Now, I have some clues. That blue dragon's cultivation is even higher than many sky demons. After we find it, you might be able to retrace your blood essence and regain the body of a sky demon. When the time comes, you won't need to worry about Xian Men anymore." He was delighted. Tao Zhenhong was wasting his lifespan with him because he saw that the carp tribe was also affected by the spiritual opportunity. Now that there was no successor, he definitely wouldn't have thought that Chu would cast aside his old ways and start anew, right? However, when he glanced over, he saw that Chu Feng was silent. He found it strange and asked, "What are you thinking about? If you have any concerns, you can tell me." Chu Feng cupped his hands. "Grandson is just thinking that if I can really reach this realm, I don't need to fight with the Clear Feather sect anymore." Chu Yu looked him up and down and said, "For you to be able to think of this, it means that I didn't misjudge you. However, you need to know that if our demon division wants to regain our prestige, we will still have to go against the Qinsang school. It is hard to say who will win. Tao Zhenhong's celestial abode is also a treasure. If we can get it, we can leave a way out for our clansmen." Only then did Chu Feng understand and said, "Then, old ancestor, when will I be able to get the remains?" Chu Feng laughed. "If it was any other junior here, they wouldn't dare to say that." However, he knew that this grandson wasn't scheming. So he said, "Don't be anxious. This abode was taken away by a magical treasure of the Su family. If it comes out again, it might trigger spiritual opportunity and be noticed by the Qinsang cultivators. Therefore, we need to wait until they are too busy to deal with anything else before we can make a move." As he spoke, he suddenly felt something and turned his head to look. He saw a clear chi heading towards the mountain gate from the northwest. He recognized that it was the doing of the Chongyuezhen Guanmizhenren. His expression changed and he laughed coldly. "I was wondering how you were going to be so stubborn. So you are also looking for a way out for yourself." Zhang Yan and Tao Zhenhong were talking and drinking tea on the mountain peak. Suddenly, they saw a clear wind coming from the sky. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Tao Zhenren stood up and said, "An esteemed guest has arrived. Please come to the peak." That clear wind turned in the sky and saw that the Clear Feather sect hadn't opened the mountain gate's restriction. It turned into a jade butterfly and landed. Then, a bright light rose up and a shadow clone appeared. However, its face was blurry and they couldn't see it clearly. They could only see the cloud made with flowing sleeves and a slim figure. She bowed to the two of them and said with a pleasant female voice, "Greetings to the two of you." Then, she turned towards Zhang Yan, "I just now received fellow Taoist Zhang's letter. I wanted to come but I had to refine a treasure and couldn't come personally. I hope fellow Taoist can forgive me. Zhang Yan smiled. This Mijinren coming here seemed to have the intention to reconcile. Just now, he could even display his Dharma form, so why couldn't he come here? He was just afraid that he and Tao Jinren would set up a trap, so he didn't dare to come. He didn't care about it and said, I am a guest, and fellow Taoist me is also a guest. We have to listen to the master regarding the matters here. Tao Jinren smiled and said, that's not a problem. It's just that I've specially prepared good tea for the two of you. Jinren won't be able to use it. Mi Jinren was silent for a while before she said, I came here today to clarify something. What happened in the past was a battle of spiritual opportunity, not some irreconcilable hatred. For Jinren Zhang's sake, my Chongyue True Temple is willing to let go of this matter. As she spoke, she turned towards Zhang Yan and said, Jinren Zhang, don't think that I'm afraid of your Qinsang school. It's just that if this massacre continues, the disciples of both sects will inevitably suffer too much damage, and it will only benefit others. Tao Jinren found it a little funny. He didn't have much contact with this Mi Jinren, but he didn't expect her to be someone who cared about her face so much. In fact, she had already given in long ago, but her words made it sound like the Clear Feather sect was the one asking her to reconcile. He didn't want to fight for the victory of words, so he said, that's true. Now that the great calamity is upon us, all the Xian men in the world are the same. It's not something we can fight for now. If we can avoid the great calamity, then everything will be fine. If we can't, then everything will be over. There's no need to fight for a moment. When Mi Jinren heard this, she said in a stiff tone, my Chongyue True Temple has the legacy of the founding masters. Even if there's a great calamity, we won't be afraid. At this moment, Tao Jinren also understood her temperament. He chuckled and said, I heard that the 5 founding masters of Chongyue True Temple all inherited the orthodox teachings of the ancient West continent. I think there's a way to avoid the calamity. However, you and I are of the same Xian men lineage. Why should we let the demon be the fisherman? Mi Jinren shook her sleeves and formed a golden flower talisman. It landed on the table and said, when Tao Jinren opened the manor in the past, a few disciples of my Chongyue True Temple didn't know the severity of the situation and offended the two Jinren. I'll give you an item as an apology. Tao Jinren picked it up and looked at it. He was shocked. With his mana, he could naturally sense that this talisman could enter a small world. Using this item as an apology was not a small price. He couldn't help but raise his eyes to look at her. Mi Jinren snorted and said, my Chongyue True Temple has a deep foundation. A small world is nothing in our eyes. Perfected Tao was a little surprised. Although it was not uncommon for cultivators to fight for their reputation at the expense of their own sect, there were not many of them. However, he also knew that if he didn't accept it, it would make the other party angry instead. It wouldn't be good. So he didn't stand on ceremony. He put it into his sleeve and bowed, thank you, Dao friend. Chapter 931. Mi Jinren saw that the grudge between the two sides was temporarily resolved, so he said a few polite words and left. Tao Jinren cupped his hands and said, fellow Taoist Zhang, after I refine this talisman, I'll refine another one and send it to you. Zhang Yan returned the greeting and said, then I'll have to trouble fellow Taoist. In reality, he was in charge of crossing Truth Hall and could enter and leave Xian Lu continent at will, so he didn't care much about a small world like Chongyue True Temple. However, this was an apology from Chongyue True Temple after all. If he didn't accept it now, then Clear Feather sect wouldn't owe him a favor and would definitely use other things to repay it. Instead of that, he might as well accept it now and avoid further trouble. Zhang Yan drank tea and drank wine with Tao Jinren on the peak and discussed Tao. Unknowingly, 3 days had passed. Even though he had achieved Tao, Tao Jinren was one step ahead of him after all. He had been in this realm for 500 years, so he naturally had a lot of experience and comprehension. After this discussion, he felt that he had gained a lot. During this period of time, Karp tribe and Chongyue True Temple had called back their disciples and clansmen, so they no longer surrounded Clear Feather sect. Zhang Yan saw that the situation was settled and wanted to return, so he bade farewell. Tao Xinren saw that he already had the intention to leave, so he didn't urge him to stay. He instructed the boy beside him, and not long after, he saw his fourth disciple, Yang Lin, coming up the peak with a male and female disciple. Yang Lin left the two behind and straightened his clothes. He came up first and greeted, "Greetings to Master, greetings to Spiritual Master Zhang." Zhang Yan said, "There's no need to stand on ceremony, Spiritual Master Yang." Yang Lin looked at his master. Tao Xinren raised his hand and said, "You may dispense with the formalities." Only then did Yang Lin straighten his body and reply to the two disciples. He shouted, "Why aren't you coming up to greet me?" The two disciples hurriedly came up to greet him. Perhaps it was their first time seeing a grotto heaven outside the sect, their expressions were a little restrained. Tao Xinren said, "Xinren Zhang, what do you think of these two people?" Zhang Yan glanced over and saw that the two of them were people with excellent aptitudes. He praised, "Not bad, I didn't expect to see such fine jade overseas. With a little bit of polishing, you will definitely become a great person." Tao Xinren heaved a sigh and said, "No matter how much effort I put in these several hundred years, there were only these two people. It's not that we can't compare to your sect. They're even weaker than Nanhua sect." Apart from the aristocratic families, the various sects of Donghua had more or less hidden people to maintain their lineage. It was like the Shaoqing sect had hundreds of countries and thousands of tribes. The Qinsang school had the 9 cities of the Black Tortoise on the Longyuan Lake. These people had been bathing in spiritual qi for a long time. Thousands of years had passed. Naturally, it was a place of beauty and talent. Few in the outside world could compare to it. And the cultivators of these sects could choose disciples from here. They didn't have to search everywhere. Even if they died of old age and reincarnated, landing here would increase their chances of entering Tao in their next life. After Xinren Tao opened the Clear Feather sect, he imitated this method and traveled across the sea. In the end, he took in more than 100 strong and healthy people into the mountain. They were nourished by spiritual vigor day and night, and were given the Qi refinement method. After more than 500 years and more than 20 generations, there were more or less a few people with excellent potential. These two people were 1 in a million. Naturally, sects like the Qinsang school didn't just look at aptitudes, they also looked at one's character. The Clear Feather sect's foundation was shallow, so they didn't need to be strict. They just needed to recruit talented people into the sect and then polish their Tao heart. These two people, one is Yu Shu Jing, the other is Yuan Zhongshu. Ever since they entered the sect, they cultivated diligently and formed their golden core in 50 years. It's just that they are confined to this narrow island and are ignorant. Can you bring them to Donghua so that they can broaden their horizons? Even though Yu Shujing and Yuan Zhongshu were the disciples of the fourth disciple, Yang Lin, they were actually taught by him personally. The reason why he did this was to protect the reputation of Yang Lin's sect. Zhang Yan thought about it and guessed Tao Xinren's intention. He smiled and said, "Why not?" Seeing that he agreed, Tao Xinren raised his cup and toasted him before drinking it in one gulp. The calamity was coming. Even though the Clear Feather sect was far away on the sea, they might not be able to stay out of it. This was his precaution. If they really couldn't avoid it and the sect was destroyed, at least one disciple would be able to leave behind his legacy. In the future, he could even bring the seniors of the sect back so that they could enter the path of Tao again in their next life. It was just that Zhang Yan was alone previously and didn't have anyone to entrust him to. Now, be it in terms of status or cultivation, there were few in the world who could be compared to him. Naturally, he entrusted him to. On the second day, Zhang Yan brought Yu Shujing and Yuan Zhongshu onto the Flood Dragon carriage and returned to the east. Tao Xinren personally went out to send them off. After traveling for over 1,000 miles, Zhang Yan said, "The East Continent isn't far from here. There's no need for fellow Taoists to send us off." Tao Xinren nodded and cupped his hands. He said solemnly, "If there's anything you need me to do, just send me a letter." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "There will be times when I'll have to trouble fellow Taoist." He also bowed and returned to the carriage. The two flood dragons shook their bodies and stirred up the wind and clouds as they returned to the East Continent. One day later, Zhang Yan looked down and pointed at an island. He said to the Wang sisters, "That's Seal Island." In the past, Master searched for the medicinal herbs that could form pills through this sea. In the blink of an eye, it's been 500 years. The Wang sisters couldn't help but look down a few more times. They couldn't help but think about how their master could cultivate to such a level without Taoist Dong Tian as his master. Thinking about the hardships he had gone through, they couldn't help but feel excited. Zhang Chan said, "Master, Taoist Jiang seems to be cultivating nearby. Now that master has returned, do you want me to inform him and ask him to come and greet you?" Wang Kaiwei said, "Teacher, junior brother Zihong has been cultivating in the Yaoyin small domain all these years, while junior brother Han has gone to the Jade Feather Pavilion to cultivate. Junior brother Jiang has only returned to the sect twice all these years. Why don't we inform them and ask them to come to the sect to pay respects to teacher?" Zhang Yan thought for a while and nodded. "That's fine. Be careful on the way." Wang Kating blinked and said, "With master here, let's see who dares to harm us sisters." Zhang Yan smiled. "There are many capable people in the world. Don't think that you can cause trouble with master here. Go quickly." The two sisters bowed and got off the carriage, riding the astral winds. The flood dragon carriage continued heading east. This time, not far away, he saw a green mountain floating on the sea. It was made of clouds and snow, and celestial birds flew around it. There were many cultivators using escape arts, and it looked quite prosperous. He thought for a while and figured out its origin. This was the Crossing Earth sect that moved out from a small world. The sect master, Yin Zhaokong, was also a person with deep roots. Unfortunately, he was trapped in a small world and stopped before the third stage. He remembered that this sect master Yin had lived for 700 to 800 years. Now that 300 years had passed, he did not see any qi of the heavenly grotto. If he did not have something that could prolong his life, he could only reincarnate. As for concealing one's qi, it was definitely impossible. For a rising sect like this, if a cultivator entered the heavenly grotto, they would only announce it to the world and not hide it. In reality, this was within his expectations. If a cultivator did not achieve Tao and wanted to become a heavenly grotto, he would still need to rely on the spirit cave. Even if he did not have the spirit cave, he would still need a lot of core jade. Therefore, even after he achieved Tao, he would still need the spirit cave to support him. Otherwise, no matter how high his aptitude was or how deep his roots were, it would be useless. Since ancient times, there was only one exception, and that was Shinchong, Shinjinren. Guangyuan sect did not have a spirit cave. This Shinjinren, with great perseverance, traveled all over the 9 continents and searched for core jade. He actually managed to become a heavenly grotto. After that, he used the core jade as a stake and searched for people of the same generation to fight. He used it to gather resources for cultivation. After countless battles of life and death, he managed to cultivate to the state of breaking through the world and ascending. His path of cultivation could be said to be obtained through battles and killings. When Zhang Yan thought about this, he felt that this predecessor was determined to achieve Tao and had an unyielding will to overcome all obstacles. A heroic spirit rose in his chest. He looked at the mountains and rivers of Donghua and chanted with his hands behind his back, "This body has been in Tao for 500 years. My ambition is everlasting. The stars move. When I sing a long song to ease my heart, I will move the heavens and earth." As soon as he spoke, he waved his sleeves and flew up with the wind. He activated his dharma and suddenly invaded thousands of miles. As he moved, the sea waves rolled and thunder and lightning appeared in the sky. A mighty chi passed through the sky and a strong wind came from the west, intending to shake the east continent. At that moment, all the sects near the sea felt a surge of spiritual vigor. The people of Taihao sect and Nanhua sect's Dongtian were shocked and surprised. Which fellow Taoist from the sea came here? Such tyrannical magic power. In the floating heavenly palace of Qinsang School, sect leader Qin Mabai suddenly woke up from his meditation. He sensed slightly and there was a flash of light in his eyes. He pondered for a moment and waved his horsetail whisk. He said in a deep voice, "Pass down my order." All the Zenrins of the sect come to the hall immediately without delay. The sound of a bell was heard and spread throughout the great lake of Dragon Abyss. Not long after, 11 beams of clear light rose from the cave abodes and headed to the main hall. In the past, when the Zenrins of Qinsang School went out, they usually came with their clones and shadows. Even when they went to the hall to discuss matters, they would conceal their qi dynamic to avoid making too much of a commotion. At this moment, they did not conceal it and raised their qi. Above the north sky, 11 beams of divine light rushed up and shone through the sky. Such a commotion did not affect other places, but it caused the tribes in the North Underworld continent to be terrified. This scene was similar to the Qinsang School's 12 Dongtian raising their swords to the north thousands of years ago. The chiefs of the various tribes even sent letters to each other, asking if they had offended the Qinsang School recently. At the same time, the 6 demon sects were alarmed. The Blood Soul sect, which was also in the north with the Qinsang School, was even more so as if they were facing a great enemy. A few Dongtian cultivators were originally in seclusion, but now they had no choice but to stop and come out to oversee the situation to calm the people. The cultivators of the various Dongtian sects were also bewildered. They did not know what was going on and sent letters to ask. In the Yuxiao School, Zhou Ruing looked at the north sky and frowned. What is the Qinsang School doing? And who is that Xuanxiang of the sea? She was a little uneasy and paced around the hall. After a while, a letter came from outside. The disciple standing at the side took a look at her and went forward to take it. He opened it and let out a sigh of relief. He turned back and said, "Master, so it's Xinren Zhang of the Qinsang School who has cultivated a Dongtian and returned from the sea. The Zenrins of the sect are happy and have come out to welcome him. Tell everyone not to panic." What? Zhou Ruing lost her composure and said sternly, "Show me the letter." The disciple was shocked and handed the letter over while trembling. Zhou Ruing took it and read it. She couldn't help but clench the letter tightly and took a few rapid breaths. She pointed outside and said, "Go shake planet Jinling, I want to see Master." Chapter 932. After knowing that the person who came from the west of the sea was Zhang Yan, many Grotto Heaven's people came out of their grotto dwellings. They looked at the horizon and watched the chaotic mystical qi cross the sea from east to west, heading towards the great pool of Dragon Abyss. In the Nanhua sect, Huang Yugong looked at the vast phenomenon in the sky, and his expression was complicated. It had only been 400 years since the sword battle between the 16 sects, but the person in front of him had already cultivated from the first stage of Yuanying to the Grotto Heaven. Although he was afraid of such a person, he also admired him. At this moment, he suddenly felt something in his heart, and his expression changed. He quickly waved his sleeves to open the prohibition, and a beam of light came from outside and landed beside him. He bowed and said, "Daoist Shi, you're here." Xinren Shi also bowed and said, "I had to come." Huang Yugong shook his head and pointed at the sky, saying, when Daoist Zhang was in the Yuanying state, his mana was already the best among his peers. Now that he has entered the Grotto Heaven, not only is he not weak, but he is even more vigorous. Even though you and I have the advantage of entering Dao first, we are still far behind. Now that Qinsang School has the momentum of the 12 Grotto Heavens, I don't know if it's good or bad for us. Xinren Shi said firmly, "Of course it's not good. There is only so much spiritual vigor in the world. There are many geniuses among the younger generation of Qinsang School. What if there are more of them? Don't forget that we are still in the midst of the 3 major trials. We are weak and have to face the trials first." Huang Yugong frowned, and his expression gradually turned serious. He said, "You and I need to come up with a plan. In the Shuashua sect, on the Lanchi terrace, a few Yuaniing elders were sitting in a pavilion. One of the elders looked at the 11 beams of divine light in the sky, and he looked worried. He said, I don't know what Chinsang school is going to do this time. I heard that a few Jinren have come out of seclusion and went to Wanling Cliff. Someone said in a deep voice, could it be that they are going to attack the sects? A white-haired Daoran waved his hand and said, don't talk nonsense, it's not like this. When a cultivator reaches the Grotto Heaven realm, he will cherish his life even more. Chinsang school is not at that critical juncture, and it is not the time for the tribulation. Why do they have to do this? Someone immediately retorted, Elder Song, that's not right. Back then, the northern Darkstar continent had the 8 demon tribes. Didn't Chinsang school not say a word? So you came to my door with a sword? Elder Song said in a deep voice, how can that be compared? The North Underworld demon tribe wants to hit the spirit cave. This is a move that will destroy the foundation of the Chinsang school. If it were you and I, we would also fight to the death. Moreover, the demon division seemed to be very powerful at that time. But there was no one to help him. There is internal discord, and the 6 sects of the spiritual sect are like one. We will prosper together, and we will suffer together. When the Blood Soul sect is in trouble, we will not sit by and watch. Even if the 11 Grotto Heavens come, Chinsang school will be able to fight them. On the other hand, the other sects of the Xianmen sect will only sit by and watch the 2 sides weaken. Therefore, I dare to say that Chinsang school will not do such a thing. When everyone heard this, they felt that it was reasonable and felt much more at ease. At that moment, a spiritual light flew over from the mountain. Elder Song grabbed it and saw that it was a letter. After reading it, his expression changed several times. Then, he said, take it. He passed the letter down, and everyone took it to read. Only then did they know that Zhang Yan had cultivated the Grotto Heaven returning mountain, and that was why the Chinsang sect did this. However, after knowing the reason, everyone's expression did not relax much. The Blood Soul sect and Chinsang school were very close, and it was not good news for the other party to have another Grotto Heaven. However, in the midst of the solemn atmosphere, there was one person drinking by himself, looking very relaxed. Someone said unhappily, why does Senior Brother Jiao look so relaxed? Senior Brother Jiao chuckled and said, this is not a bad thing for us. Someone asked, what do you mean? Daoran Jiao said, at most 10 years later, a spirit cave will appear. Chinsang school has always been based on merit. This spiritual master Zhang is not a disciple of the Grotto Heaven sect. If he has not cultivated the Grotto Heaven sect, he will have to enter the spirit cave again to compete. I would like to ask everyone, who can win against him? Many of them kept silent. It was rumored that in the spirit cave, Zhang Yan had single-handedly defeated 8 third-stage spiritual masters. In the end, it was all thanks to spiritual master Huan that they managed to resolve the crisis. How could they have the guts to go against such a person? Someone snorted and said, if that's the case, it's a good thing. Senior Brother Jiao chuckled and said, what's the point of thinking so much? You and I are just chess pieces. Whether the spiritual master of Chinsang school's Grotto Heaven is 11 or 12, what difference does it make to us? Why don't we enjoy ourselves for a few more days before the calamity arrives? Elder Song glanced at him and waved his sleeve. Everyone, there's no need to gather here. Go back to your cave residences, lest the hearts of the people become unstable. As soon as he spoke, the other elders all dispersed, but only Elder Jiao was called back and sternly said, Elder Jiao, if you continue to waste our morale like this, then don't bother with people in the future. Elder Jiao chuckled and cupped his fists at him. Then, he turned into a beam of light and flew away. At this moment, the Jade Feather Pavilion was bustling with people. Elder Yan Xiaoyang had achieved Yuanying, so all the sects that were on good terms with him came to send congratulatory gifts. Han Zuocheng, on the other hand, was a little unhappy. He found an excuse to leave the banquet and went to the back of the mountain alone. When he arrived at a large lake, he casually took out a jar of wine and opened it. The wine flowed out of the jar, and the fragrance of the wine filled the air. However, there was a sound from the lake, and a golden flood dragon broke out of the water. It sucked gently, and the wine turned into a line that slowly entered its stomach. It shook its head and wagged its tail, saying, "Good wine, good wine." Hans Wucheng laughed and said, "You old flood dragon, if it's wine, just drink it. How can you tell good from bad?" Ao Tong stared at him and said, "Brother Han, you seem to have something on your mind." Hans Wucheng fell silent and said, "After the new year, I intend to return to bright seclusion to cultivate." Ao Tong sighed and asked, "Why are you focusing on cultivation?" He knew why Hans Wucheng didn't want to stay in bright nether heavenly lake, and instead insisted on running out. He was watching his juniors surpass him in cultivation, and as a senior, it wouldn't be good for him to do so, so he might as well avoid them. Hans Wucheng sighed and said, "In the past, I never focused on cultivation. I always felt that I just wanted to live a carefree life. However, after thinking about it, with Master's great capabilities, if I did not live up to expectations, I would be embarrassing Master." Ao Tong said excitedly, "Are you seeking a paradise?" Hans Wucheng said in a bad mood, "It is only first senior sister and second senior brother's matter. I can't do it." He only cared about his own matters. If he did not have a firm heart for the great Tao, if he could enter Yuanying in the future, that would be the end of his path. When Ao Tong heard this, he felt dispirited. When Hans Wucheng saw Ao Tong's expression, he felt it was strange. "Old Ao, didn't you always say that no one would accompany you to drink when I was in closed-door cultivation? Why? Now, you want me to focus on cultivation?" Ao Tong sighed and said, "Old Ao, I do not have many friends in the sect. However, Brother Han is very fond of you. If you die early, I will not be able to help you. If you die early, old Ao is really boring." Hans Wucheng smiled and said, "Don't worry." He said, "Don't worry, just because of this old flood dragon, I will live for a few more years." At this moment, a letter flew in from outside. Ao Tong immediately reached out to take it. He said, "Just now, the Qinsang sect is really showing signs of life. However, I do not know what it is, so I went to ask. There should be a reply now." Who knew that when he took a look, his hands would tremble? He said, "Master. Master's old man has formed a paradise outside and is now back on the mountain." In his joy, he could not be bothered to speak with Ao Tong. He said, "I need my wife to tell me about such an important matter." He flew back excitedly. Not long after, he returned to the sect. Voices came from inside. Listening carefully, he realized it was the Yen siblings talking. Every time this uncle saw him, he would mock and ridicule him. Hence, he did not want to see him. He turned to leave, but he heard Yen Xiaoyang say, "Sis, although this little brother has achieved Yuanying, I lack a suitable spiritual beast. I think that there is no use for brother-in-law to keep that pair of dragon geese. Why don't you let this little brother keep them?" Hans Wucheng was startled and stopped. Yen Xie said, "Little brother, I know you love that pair of beasts. Mother gave them to your brother-in-law before she passed away. You should not be greedy for them. What is the point of keeping them in his hands? They will be wasted for nothing." Yen Xie's voice was somewhat displeased. "Little brother, how can you say that about your brother-in-law? Have I ever said anything wrong? Look at him, drinking and having fun all day, not thinking of improving himself. You two love each other, but look at the outside world. The great calamity is coming. When the time comes, the two of you can hide in Qinsang school. Won't I be managing your ancestral inheritance?" Yen Xie said angrily, "Little brother, how can you say such things?" When Hans Wucheng heard this, he lifted the curtain and stepped inside. Both of their expressions changed. Yen Xie's face was full of worry, while Yen Xiaoyang's face was filled with a cold smile. Hans Wucheng glanced at the two of them, then said to Yen Xiaoyang, "Little brother, you can come to my place tomorrow to get those dragon geese." Then, he raised his hand to stop Yen Xie from speaking. There is a letter from the sect. My master has formed a paradise and returned from outside the mountains. As his disciple, I should pay my respects. If it is convenient for you, wife, you can accompany me. Above the great pool of Dragon Lake, Chinsang School's restriction formation was wide open. The 11 spiritual masters stood in the hall. Not long after, a ray of mystical energy came from the east. It could cover the sky and cover the earth, clear and turbid. It was gentle and indistinct, shapeless and formless, as if it contained endless changes in the mysteries. Shen Baishuang observed for a moment, then said, Spiritual Master Zhang's Dharma is indescribable, and its meaning is incomprehensible. What does Senior Brother Sect Master think of it? Sect Master Qin pondered for a moment, then said slowly, mystical energy develops the absolute beginning, the dark void is silent, the spirit is dark and true purple, the innate creation diagram, this can be said to be the innate mystical image. Shen Baishuang thought for a moment, then said, it deserves this name. Zhang Yan arrived above the great pool of Dragon Lake, his body swayed, and he retracted his dharma. He floated into the floating heavenly palace and walked up the steps. Everywhere he passed, the boys standing on both sides bowed deeply, calling him Spiritual Master Zhang. Not long after, he stepped into the main hall, looked up, and saw that the people of Chinsang School Grotto Heaven were all in the hall. On the right side, there were 5 spiritual masters, Meng Zhida, Shen Baishuang, Qin Yu, Zhu Zhixing, and Sun Zhiyan. On the left side, there were 5 spiritual masters, Xiao Rongyu, Du Yunzhan, Han Ziyang, Yan Gongzhen, and Peng Wenin. Only Qi Yuntian stood close to the sect master, he was probably the deputy hall master of the upper extreme hall. Meng Zhen bowed and said, the sect master has an order, Hall Master Du Zhen, please take your seat. Zhang Yan returned the bow, waved his sleeves, and walked forward confidently. He walked to the front of the crowd, stood in front of the true hall master, first bowed to the sect master, then turned around. The spiritual masters of the Grotto Heaven all bowed, greetings, Hall Master Du Zhen. Zhang Yan also bowed and said, greetings, spiritual masters. As soon as he finished speaking, a ray of light rushed into the sky under his feet. There were 12 rays of light that cooperated with the divine light from before, shining brightly in the northern sky, illuminating half of the continent. After the chaos in the previous generation, Chinsang became 12 Grotto Heavens again. Chapter 933. In the main hall, Qin Zhangmen saw that all the Zhenren were present. He ordered people to set up the incense table, burn the incense and pay their respects to Xian Zhang. Then he led the people to pay their respects to the ancestors of the past generations and the ascended Zhenren. Finally he called for Zhang Yan to come forward and pass on the robe and seal. At this time Meng Zhen came out from his seat and invited the founder's decree to be read aloud in the hall. Ever since the previous temple master of the Duzhen Palace, Zhui Yuming, ascended to the immortal world, this position had been vacant for nearly 500 years. Now that there was a successor to replace him, naturally it was necessary to announce his authority, his orders, and his responsibilities to the palace. After the ceremony was over, Zhang Yan's name was written on the jade tablet and sent to the side hall, where it was enshrined together with the true worshippers in the hall. In this manner, 2 hours had already passed. Sect leader Qin cast his gaze down and said, Zhang Yan, since you have entered the elephant realm and are hall master Du Zhen, you should try to open a grotto heaven in the future. If you want, you can choose a grotto heaven of the predecessors to cultivate in. You can also gather everyone to help you open it. If a grotto heaven cultivator could obtain a grotto heaven, they would have an additional path of retreat when fighting. It was just that those who had just entered this realm were mostly powerless. However, if the sect was passed down for a long time and possessed deep resources and reserves, then this matter wasn't difficult to deal with. The younger generation could naturally inherit the legacy of their predecessors, just like Zhu Zhixing and Yan Gongzhen. Another method was to pass it down from master to disciple. Zhui Yuming had left his grotto heaven to his disciple, Shen Baishuang, and the Xianmen families followed this path. However, other than that, there were also people who asked for help from their sect and friends. For example, when Sun Jinren opened his heavenly abode, he received the help of Mengjin's magical power. The more powerful one's mana and the more profound one's cultivation, the larger the grotto heaven would be. It was even more convenient to practice the developing method, and it could also have many other wonderful uses. Zhang Yan thought about it for a while. Although it was a good thing to open the grotto heaven in advance, if he borrowed someone else's help, he would owe them a big favor. Moreover, after the grotto heaven is opened, it still needs to be cultivated by one's own spiritual energy. Otherwise, after a long time, it will definitely disappear. If it came from someone else's hands, it would be impossible to move it. But it might not be as he wished. His thoughts settled. He cupped his hands and said, "Sect leader, this disciple will not fall behind others. I am willing to do this myself in the future." Sect leader Qin nodded with a smile and did not mention this matter again. He turned to the others. He said, "If there is nothing else, you may leave now." At this time, Spiritual Master Shao raised his hand and bowed, saying, "Sect Master, Spiritual Master, I have something to report here." Sect leader Qin said, "Speak, Shidi." Perfected being Shao looked at the people sitting in the hall. He said, "Everyone should know that in at most 10 years, another demonic cave will appear. This time, it will be in the southwest. The day before yesterday, the 10 sects had a meeting and decided that our Qinsang school will stop the blood soul from heading south." Sun Jinren frowned and said, "That day, the blood soul sect was heavily injured by perfected being Zhang. It will not be difficult to stop it. Let Qin Feng deal with it himself." "It is not a big deal, why did perfected being Shao bring it here to talk about it?" Perfected Han spoke at the right time. Sun Jinren's words are wrong. In the previous battle, it was the demonic sect who was waiting for me to break through. They gathered in one place, so it was easy to find them. This time, it is the Taoists who want to tie up the hands and feet of the blood soul and not let it go to the south. The two cannot be mentioned in the same breath. Perfected being Shao also said in a deep voice, "Although it is not difficult, we are lacking manpower. Chen Feng came to my place a few days ago to ask for the protection of the upper hall elders. The side hall master of the daylight hall, Hu Xian, has already agreed to send the elders to help. However, the right hall master of the Duzhen hall, Ning Chongxian, is in seclusion and has not responded. Since perfected being Zhang has returned to the mountain today, I would like to ask if you can also send 1 or 2 people to help." Ever since Zhang Yan became the master of the Duzhen hall, Ning Chongxian took over the position of the 10 first seats. After the latter took over the right hall of the Duzhen hall, Zhang Yan took over the position until now. However, he had not cultivated to the 3rd stage, so he was anxious to ask for the help of the elders in the sect. At this moment, everyone in the hall looked at Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "May I ask perfected being Shao, who will be sending the people to suppress the demonic cave?" Perfected being Shao said, "The demonic cave is in the south, so it belongs to Yuxiao. After the matter is over, he is willing to repay our sect with precious pills." The pill jade produced from the spiritual cave was also divided into different grades. Generally, there were big pill jade and small pill jade. It would take at least 1,000 years for the big pill jade to be produced, while the small pill jade would take dozens of years. There were even inferior pills that could be used by Yuanying cultivators. As for the remaining ones to suppress and destroy the demonic cave, they were the best among them. They were called pill treasures and could support a heavenly abode cultivator to cultivate for more than 100 years. If it was supplemented with the pure spiritual essence of heaven and earth such as Jun Yang's spiritual essence, it would not be difficult to use it for hundreds of years. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "The devil sect is the enemy of our Xianmen. For the sake of the overall situation, the Duzhen hall will naturally contribute." When the few perfected beings from the aristocratic families saw that he had relented, their expressions were slightly relieved. After a few more words in the hall, seeing that there was nothing else, sect leader Qin waved his horsetail whisk and said, "Zhang Yan will stay, the rest of you can disperse." The perfected beings in the hall agreed in unison and bowed with a Dao salute. Then, they left the hall and returned to their respective cave abodes. After leaving the two of them alone in the hall, sect leader Qin casually asked a few questions about his travels and said, "Come back here in 30 days. I have something to tell you." Zhang Yan's heart skipped a beat. He looked at the sect leader's back and seemed to be deep in thought. When he left the hall, a boy came up and handed over a few jade letters respectfully. He said, "Hall Master Zhang, the few perfected beings ordered me to hand these to you." Zhang Yan took a look and saw that they were left by Qi Yuntian, Sun Jinren, and the others. They had all invited him to attend a banquet. He kept them in his sleeve and flew down. He did not return to the sect first. Instead, he went to the pill tripod courtyard. With just a turn of his Dharma power, he had already arrived in front of the fish boat. However, at this moment, his Dharma power was vast. The strange fish that was carrying the boat only sensed the slightest bit of qi. It seemed to be frightened and trembled, causing the boat to sway unsteadily. Zhou Chengju naturally sensed it and immediately came out from the inside. He looked up and revealed a happy expression. He stroked his beard and smiled. "I knew that junior brother had come." Zhang Yan bowed and said, "I've disturbed senior brother's cultivation." Zhou Chengju smiled and said, "What are you talking about? With junior brother's current cultivation, it's my honor to be able to come here personally." He looked at him up and down and nodded repeatedly. He sighed and said, "Junior brother can obtain the grotto heaven. I have hope for revenge in this life." As he said that, he beckoned him to come in. When Zhang Yan sat down in the fish boat, he took out an item and placed it on the table. He said, "I went to the sea today and obtained this strange item that can increase one's lifespan. I have no use for it, so I'll give it to senior brother." Zhou Chengju sighed. "Thank you, junior brother." He took it and opened it. It was 2 green and tender fruits. After examining it for a while, he stroked his beard and said, "So it's the great chun fruit. I've only seen it in ancient books. It's said that this divine tree has been extinct in the 9 continents for tens of thousands of years. Where did junior brother get it from?" Zhang Yan did not hide anything and told him where it came from. When Zhou Chengju heard it, he shook his head and said, "That cultivator from the Illumination Palace didn't know how to use it and wasted such a good item. If I used it as a supplement to a secret medicine, I could at least increase its medicinal effect by 20%. Zhang Yan smiled. Zhou Chengju was a grandmaster of alchemy. How could others compare to him? Even if he was well versed in techniques and didn't lack precious materials, he still might not be able to refine it. After Zhou Chengju kept the divine tree fruit properly, he raised his head and said solemnly, "Junior brother, you don't have to worry about me. I may not have any other abilities, but I have some experience in the path of alchemy. With the life-prolonging items that you've given me, it's not difficult to add another few hundred years to my lifespan." He paused and said solemnly, "In the next few hundred years, you should try your best to raise your cultivation level to deal with the calamity." Zhang Yan sat for 2 hours and came out of the pill cauldron courtyard. He then turned into a ray of light and flew towards the true purification palace. When he reached the outer hall, he waved his sleeve and a ray of spiritual light flew out. In a flash, more than 20 rays of light flew over and landed at the bottom of the stairs. They bowed down and said in unison, "Greetings, sage." Zhang Yan's gaze swept across the people in front of him. There were 4 third-stage cultivators and he said, "Are the elders on duty here?" One of them, Daoren, took 2 steps forward and bowed, reporting to Hall Master, "The left and right hall's elders on duty are all here." Zhang Yan flicked his finger and a talisman fell down as he said calmly, "You may act according to this." After that Daoren received it, he bowed his head to take a look and said respectfully, "I will obey your orders." Zhang Yan nodded slightly as his heart was filled with emotions. Thinking of the past, in order to break the Devil's Cave, he had to go through a lot of trouble to recruit manpower. Even so, among the elders in the upper hall, other than sect leader Peng Yuzhou's orders, he couldn't touch anyone. Now that they were going to die, he could make the decision with just a word. If one didn't enter this realm, no matter how high one's seniority was, no matter how long one cultivated, he was merely a chess piece. He straightened his body and instantly turned into a ray of light and flew away. The 20 over people in front of the hall hurriedly bowed to send him off. Zhang Yan passed through the main hall and naturally entered the Xuanzi realm. This time, he didn't go to the left hall but entered the clouds and headed towards the main hall. Not long after flying in the empty sky, his body trembled as if he had knocked through a layer of mist. The scenery in front of him changed. Spiritual mist was everywhere as if he was stepping on a sea of clouds, and there seemed to be a cloud dragon swimming back and forth in it. In front of him, there was a spiral staircase that spiraled upwards, leading to an unknown depth. There were 4 huge pillars in the sky, and they were so high that the top could not be seen. It was as if he had taken a step into a celestial palace. He touched the seal in his sleeve, and the spiral staircase turned and instantly paved the path in front of him. He took a step forward, and after 100 steps, he heard the sound of flowing water. He looked towards the direction of the sound and saw that there was a big pond on his right. At this moment, there were a few lotus buds that opened up, and a few beautiful women came out. The one in the lead had a graceful figure and a gorgeous face. She bowed and said, "Welcome, Hall Master." With just a glance, Zhang Yan saw through her and knew that she was the formation spirit of this place. He waved his hand and said, "There's no need for you here, you can leave now." The woman in the lead bowed and said, "If Hall Master has any instructions, you can call me." Zhang Yan walked to the end of the Dao path, and there was only a big stone plate here. It was smooth and had no corners, but if one looked carefully, it seemed like it could reflect the stars in the sky. He took out the Hall Master's seal and placed it on top. There was a clear spiritual qi supporting it, and it was slowly sent up. This fate plate was where the pivot of the main hall was, and only by refining it, could this place be in the palm of one's hand. However, this item was very difficult to refine, and if it wasn't completed within 100 days, the seal would fly out of the void, and it would be difficult to find again. In the future, even if he had the title of Hall Master, it would be difficult for him to enter this place. After Zhang Yan watched the seal reach the sky, he released his mana, and with a rumble, a stream of chaotic underworld qi rose up and enveloped the whole main hall. Chapter 934. 3 days later, Zhang Yan refined the fate plate and took control of the entire hall. The image in the sky shook and slowly converged, forming his figure again. But at this moment, a majestic spiritual vigor gushed out from the stone plate, like 100 rivers flowing into the sea, gushing towards him. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, knowing that this was the pure spiritual vigor that had been trapped in the main hall for the past 500 years. If no one used this qi, it could only be left to dissipate in the body. Hence, he opened his mouth and inhaled, swallowing the qi into his stomach. He then sat cross-legged and refined it. 20 days passed quickly. Just now, he had absorbed all the spiritual vigor. He opened his eyes and felt his spiritual qi flourish. He waved his hand and the seal fell from the sky and returned to his hand. He used his spiritual will to look inside. In a flash, all the decorations in the main hall, from the mountains and rivers to the grass and trees, were all clear to him. He looked at the sky and saw that there was only 1 day left before the appointment with the sect leader. He thought about it and decided to stay here for now. He would return to the cave abode after this. He waved his hand and 2 items flew out from the sky and landed in front of him. He looked at them, one was a jade disc and the other was a jade booklet. He first picked up the jade disc. 30% of the elixir jade produced by the spirit cave in Qinsang belonged to the Duzhen Hall. This item recorded the number of elixir jade taken in the past. He used his spiritual will to explore and after a while, he had a general idea. When the previous hall leader, Zhui Yuming, was in power, he did not need elixir jade and had accumulated a lot of them. However, he took care of his martial niece, Qin Yu, and gave her some from time to time. But most of them were still there. After he ascended, he did not touch them again, so the number was considerable. As the hall leader, he could decide what to do with these elixir jade. No one else could interfere, not even the sect leader. After Zhang Yan looked at the jade disc, he put it down and took out the jade booklet. This was a record of the past and achievements of every elder in the Dujin Hall. If the hall leader was suspicious, he could summon them for questioning. If it was not recorded, he could strip him of his status as an elder and expel him from the palace. He flipped through the list and found that there were 2 elders in the left hall. They were Luo Qingyu and Zhuang Bufan. Since the last time they parted, he was still in seclusion. Looking at the right hall, there was only one person. Elder Zhong Muqing was nearing the end of his life. He was also in seclusion. As for the right palace master Ning Chongxian, he was cultivating in his master son Jinren's cave. It was no wonder that the aristocratic families could not find him. Zhang Yan looked at his past achievements and nodded. When the 5 real and fake devils cave came out, he once set up a magic altar and formation at the place where the spiritual vigor was stagnant. He also cooperated with various small sects to ambush people from the demon division. On the surface, it was to find out the whereabouts of the spiritual vigor and identify the real and fake devil's cave. In reality, it was to force the cultivators of the devil's doctrine to come out so that he could kill them with his sword. Later on, even though he had passed away, these altars were still there. After Ning Chongxian succeeded the throne, he went one step further and expanded the number of altars several times. In this way, as long as the disciples of the Bloody Soul sect came out of the door, they would be able to find out in advance, and then they could quickly lead the people to kill them. Therefore, with the full support of the master and disciple, the effect was very good. It was like the northern land had formed a big net, isolating the Bloody Soul sect from the other 5 sections. When he was in power, the devil's doctrine in the northern land was almost extinct. After Zhang Yan finished reading, he took out the seal of the hall master and stamped it on the jade booklet to show his approval. Then, he flicked his sleeves and kept the 2 items. He then sat cross-legged and silently practiced the Xian technique. On the second day, he woke up from his meditation and turned into a ray of light, flying towards the floating heavenly palace. Before he reached the main hall, before he even stepped in, he had a feeling that from today onwards, everything inside and outside the Qinsang school would no longer be a secret to him. The Taoist child in front of the door saw him and said, "Jinren Zhang, sect leader Jinren said that once you arrive, you can go and see him." Zhang Yan nodded slightly and walked inside. Not long after, he arrived at the main hall and saw sect leader Qin sitting on the jade platform. He bowed and said, "Greetings, sect leader." Sect leader Qin waved his horsetail whisk and said, "Sit down and talk." Zhang Yan expressed his gratitude and sat down on his seat. Sect leader Qin smiled and said, "The patriarch left 6 tablets at the back of the hall, and there were also pictures that corresponded to the 6 demons that were sealed in each continent. Today, I see that 5 of the tablets have cracked, and the pictures of the 5 demons have no fire, so they must have been dealt with by you." Zhang Yan replied, "Disciple has already suppressed and destroyed 5 of the demons. It's a pity that the remains of the Azure Dragon are still missing." Sect leader Qin did not mind and said, "If this thing appears, it will be difficult to hide its tracks. Let's not bother about it for now." Zhang Yan nodded and agreed. Sect leader Qin stood up and said to him, "Follow me." Saying so, he turned and walked towards the back of the hall. Zhang Yan also stood up and followed behind. After walking 100 steps, they heard the sound of tides. A golden light fell from the hall and covered the 2 of them. Then, with another flash, there was no trace of them in the hall. Zhang Yan felt the scenery change. His eyes swept around and in an instant, he had seen the landscape. He knew that he was on a foreign continent. But when he looked outside, he was shocked to find that this place was actually floating in the void. Up and down, he could see the sun and moon, and billions of stars. Sect leader Qin said, "This place was originally a central pillar, but a section was broken off. That day, when Jinren and the sky demon fought, it was shaken and fell outside the 9 heavens. Later, the patriarch took it and refined it into our sect's upper extreme hall. It can fly here and there and enter the inner and outer worlds." He waved his fly whisk again and the 2 of them flashed. With a gust of wind, they arrived at the top of a cliff. This was the highest point of the continent and they looked down. The mountains were all small, and looking out from here, the land of the 9 provinces was like a chicken wrapped in clouds. Sect leader Qin looked at the 9 continents and said in a deep voice, "In 1,000 years, there will be 3 great tribulations. The first is the heavens' tribulation. The second is the earth's tribulation. The energy of the earth flows, and the turbid rises and the clear declines. And the third is the person's tribulation. Of the 3 tribulations, this is the fiercest." Zhang Yan said, "Since it is the person's tribulation, then it must be because of the person and because of the person." Sect leader Qin nodded and said, "That is correct. However, this tribulation is divided into immediate and distant worries. Let's talk about the immediate worry first." He raised his fly whisk and pointed forward. "Look." Zhang Yan looked over, his eyes piercing through the clouds. He saw that there were 3 continents joined together. It was extremely vast and he recognized it. He said, "That is where the 3 western continents are." Sect leader Qin said, "You suppressed the sky demon and came here before. What do you think of this place?" Zhang Yan shook his head and said, "The spiritual energy is scattered and the qi is weak. It is not a place for cultivators to live." Sect leader Qin said, "But in the ancient times, that place was a blessed land for cultivators. It was extremely prosperous. This is very similar to the situation now." Zhang Yan's thoughts turned and he thought to himself, "Disciple once heard that the reason why these 3 continents declined was because someone rashly moved the roots of the land." Sect leader Reverend's intention. Could it be that the person's tribulation should also be here? Sect leader Qin said in a deep voice, "This matter could have been done by the predecessors. The people of today can also do it." From the moment the pure qi weakened, the people's hearts were already uneasy. Zhang Yan was deeply in agreement. Grotto heaven cultivators mostly relied on the spiritual points to cultivate. The 3 sects were fine as they used the qi of other continents to form the spiritual points. However, the spiritual points of the other 7 sects were all in the East Flower continent. How would they be willing to watch as the spiritual points declined? Before this, they reached out to the 3 sects for help to ask for essence qi to delay the decline of the spiritual points. However, the earth energy of the 3 sects did not come out of nowhere, so how could they give it away for no reason? Even if they could get a small share, it could only be used to deal with a moment of urgency. To put it bluntly, this was just a life-threatening move. In the end, there was only one way left, and that was to steal the earth qi. However, this was undoubtedly drinking poison to quench one's thirst, and it would even mess up the spiritual opportunity of the world. If it really reached that stage, even the 3 sects would not be able to remain unscathed. In the ancient times, the West continent cultivators could still hide in the East continent. If the East continent perished, where could they go? Sect leader Qin continued, when the 3rd sect leader was in power, because he foresaw that there would be a calamity in the future, he discussed this matter with the leaders of the Yuxiao and Shaoqing sections. At that time, the West continent was not far from the past. In the end, the 3 of them agreed that anyone who dares to touch the earth's roots will be killed by the 3 sects. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "With the 3 sects working together, it is indeed not difficult to suppress the other sections. However, those who can touch the earth's roots are also very skilled. If they fight with their lives, not only the East Flower continent, but the other 3 continents will also not be safe. I believe the 3 Zenrens have magical treasures to protect them." Sect leader Qin said, "That's right." The founder of the Yuxiao school, Jinren Yaohan, had a jade cliff that could suppress the continent. In the ancient times, when he fought with the heavenly demons, he relied on this treasure to protect most of the 4 continents. After he passed away, this treasure was still in the sect. When I was in the Qinsang school annihilated the 8 demon tribes, I borrowed this item. Later, when Shaoqing attacked the cultivators of the central continent, I also borrowed it. When Zhang Yan heard this, he frowned slightly and said, "If that is the case, we also need to borrow treasures from Yuxiao. This is being controlled by others." Sect leader Qin smiled and said, "That's right. how can such a big matter be controlled by others? Moreover, this move of Yu Xiao might also be a hidden scheme. When the fourth generation sect leader was in power, he had his suspicions and thus became enemies with Yu Xiao. It was only after my master took over the position and annihilated the North Underworld demon tribe that things eased up a little. Zhang Yan asked doubtfully, in the past, when I thought about this matter, I was always puzzled. The ancient heavenly demons had long been annihilated by the founder, and the remaining ones were merely used by the founder to train me. But after thousands of years, they could actually stand on equal footing with our Qinsang school. Later, they even had the intention to open up spiritual points. What exactly is the reason for them to be able to do so? Grotto Heaven cultivators did not come out of thin air. To cultivate a Grotto Heaven, there were no spiritual points, and they also needed elixir jades. For example, Chongyuezhen Temple was originally a cultivator of the West Continent, and naturally had the legacy of their ancestors. Another example would be Dongxing Zhongtai and Xianyue sects. Their foundation came from the spirit-returning sect that founder Dami had annihilated 10,000 years ago. As for the Zhenren of the three sects of Dongxing South Continent, they were originally cultivators of Donglai. In the ancient times, when there was no formation to isolate the continent from the outside world, it was also a blessed land for cultivation. No matter what, these few sects had roots that could be found. However, the demon cultivators of the North Dark Continent were originally based on the path of strength. There was no such thing as a spiritual point, and there was no Taoist book. Yet, the 8 divisions had produced several Grotto Heaven cultivators in thousands of years. The reason for this was really hard to understand. Sect leader Qin's eyelids drooped, and he said, "Fellow Taoist Chengju should have told you before that Guo Songyao of the Turtle Division and I are old friends. That year, before I took over as the sect leader, I also had this suspicion. I once asked him where did the 8 divisions' provisions come from. He looked at Tian Nan, and said, I have my own origins." Zhang Yan's eyes flickered slightly. Although the sect leader did not say it explicitly, it was not difficult for him to hear that the 8 divisions most likely had the help of Yu Xiao. The chaos of Zhongzhou that year, which led to Shaoqing's westward expedition, was also quite similar to this. What was worth mentioning was that these 2 sects later borrowed the Dharma treasure of that Yu Xiao spirit cliff. With such a connection, one could not help but suspect that there was some ulterior motive. Thinking of this, he said coldly, Yu Xiao is not trustworthy, this method cannot be used. Floating astronomy. P.S. There will be more tomorrow. Chapter 935. As soon as Zhang Yan said this, sect leader Qin nodded and said in a deep voice, Yu Xiao is not trustworthy, so we Qinsang have to find another way to avoid the tribulation of humans. Zhang Yan thought for a while and asked, just now, sect leader said that the tribulation of humans can be divided into immediate and distant worries. What is the distant worry? Sect leader Qin didn't say anything. He just flicked his finger, and a wisp of clear qi gathered into a ball. It hugged together and floated half a foot in front of him. Every time a wisp of qi dissipated, it would take some from the void to replenish itself. If this continued, it could last for several days without dissipating. However, at this moment, sect leader Qin raised his horsetail whisk and gently swept it. It suddenly trembled violently and slowly dispersed. Although it tried its best to gather together, it could not stop itself from dispersing. After a while, it disappeared into heaven and earth, and not a trace of it could be found. Zhang Yan seemed to have understood something when he saw this. Sect leader Qin sighed softly and said, this world's spiritual vigor is like this qi. From the moment it is born, it is dissipating. If there is no external force to absorb it, perhaps it can last for billions of years. But as cultivators of my generation, every time we breathe in and absorb the essence, it will quickly disappear. The 3rd generation sect leader once deduced that if the world situation did not change, the spiritual opportunity in the 4 continents under our feet could prosper for 100,000 years. However, when the previous sect leader made another deduction, he realized that with the flourishing of the world's mystical techniques, there was only 10,000 years left. When Zhang Yan heard this, he could not help but fall silent. As the number of cultivators in the world increased, the spiritual opportunity naturally became more and more insufficient, and the 9 continents became more and more difficult to bear. This was like a big boat that carried too many passengers, and in the end, there was a risk of it capsizing. However, 90% of it was taken away by the people in the grotto heaven. Most of them relied on the elixir jade of the spirit cave to cultivate. If the supply was insufficient, there would be chaos after a long period of hunger, just like in the West continent. From this, one could imagine that even if the East Flower continent was lucky enough to avoid the 3 great tribulations this time, as long as this problem was not resolved, it would be inevitable for the West continent to repeat in the future. He narrowed his eyes and really wanted to resolve this matter. At least half of the cultivators in the grotto heaven world had to be killed. As the saying goes, fortune is always accompanied by misfortune. Fortune and misfortune depended on each other. From this, it could be seen that calamities and tribulations from the heavens killed all the cultivators in the world. It was not entirely a bad thing. He pondered for a moment. He turned to look at sect leader Qin. He asked, since sect leader Reverend has specifically brought up this topic, this disciple would like to ask, do you already have the method to resolve the calamity? Sect leader Qin said in a deep voice, we are trapped in a corner. Sitting and waiting for death is not something we can do. When he spoke up to hear, he raised his hand and pointed at the sky above him. I don't know how many profound heavens there are outside this place, so why should we restrict ourselves here? Hearing this, Zhang Yan's heart was stirred. He took a deep breath and asked, Sect leader Reverend, are you going to another world to live? There were thousands of mysterious worlds in the Great Tao cycle. Beyond this world, there was the mysterious heaven beyond the heavens. For example, Qinsang's master Tai Ming Jinren, Shaoqing's master Hong He Jinren, Yuxiao's master Yao Han Jinren, Nether Spring's master Ling Yu Jinren, and Dukhen Sek's master Uncle Jinren Feng Jinren. When he traveled to the West continent, he saw scattered records of the cultivators outside the world in the eroded inscriptions. However, it was only a few words and was not detailed. He did not know if they all came from the same place or how many people there were. Sect leader Qin smiled and said, this is not something I came up with on a whim. When the 3rd sect leader Reverend broke through the world and ascended, he accidentally sensed a world in the void. At that time, it had not been long since it was created, but it was bigger than the 9 continents. However, it was not suitable for him to go, so at that moment, he sent a strand of his spirit back, specifically pointing out where he should go. When the 4th sect leader was in power, there was a period of time when he and Yu Xiao could be said to be like fire and water. At that time, this reverend thought that the East continent would be in chaos again and again in the West continent, so this could be considered a good way out. Therefore, before he passed away, he left behind a book and told the younger generation of disciples that if one day the situation was bad, they could go to this world. However, he did not expect that when Master took charge of the sect, the North Dark Continent's demon tribe happened to be in chaos, and because of this, there was a dispute in the sect. At this point, sect leader Qin stretched out his hand and pointed, and a jade disc appeared. He said, as a disciple, it is not convenient for me to say what my master did. This is the record of the sect at that time, you can take a look. With a thought, Zhang Yan turned the jade disc into a ray of light and flew into the space between his eyebrows. In an instant, he understood the past. At that time, the North Dark Demon tribe wanted to seal the spirit cave. After careful consideration, the 5th sect leader Qin Qingang decided to borrow the treasure of Yu Xiao to suppress the continent, and then lead the people to destroy it. However, the Duzhen Hall master He Jingchen had a different opinion. He insisted that the Yu Xiao school was harboring evil intentions, and that this must not be done, otherwise it would lead to a great disaster. It was better to follow the 4th sect leader's plan, to abandon this place and go to another world. However, Qin Qingang thought that the sect was still at its peak, even if it fell out with Yu Xiao, there was no need to be afraid, so why was there a need to rush? At that time, Qin Qinggang's reputation was flourishing, and with the support of the Daylight Hall master, he suppressed all the different opinions in the sect, borrowed the Jade Cliff, and led the people to destroy the North Dark Demon tribe in one fell swoop. In the end, nothing happened to Yu Xiao. And after Zhu Zhen returned from the North Dark, according to the sect's records, he did not say a word or two to that hall master He. When Zhang Yan saw this, he sighed in his heart. He naturally knew that this Shinran passed away in a sitting posture in the furnace of earth fire, and his body was ignored for more than 1,000 years. However, if this Shinran did not have a disciple in this world, perhaps it would not be like this. He shook his head and said, I saw that the previous sect leader was full of misgivings. I think it is not an easy thing to break through the world and leave. Sect leader Qin sighed and said, it is not only not easy, there are two difficulties in this world. First, to use this method, there needs to be a cultivator who has ascended. When he breaks through the two worlds' entrances, he needs to take the treasure left by the patriarch to stabilize the bridge between heaven and earth. Then, with the guidance of the third sect leader, he can go to this world. But even so, out of the 12 Grotto Heaven people, with the spiritual opportunities stored in the sect, at most 4 people can escape, the rest can only stay here, and let it run its own course. Let me ask, if it is not a matter of life and death, how can this be done? Secondly, because of the hidden dangers in the virtual sky, the cultivators who have ascended in the past may not all be able to go to the upper realm. There are many people who are trapped here, unable to go to the other side. However, in my sect, the patriarch once had a talisman. One can naturally understand the spiritual connection, and find the right path, but if it is another world, if one wants to ascend again, it may not be possible. And without this talisman, there will be many more variables for the cultivators who ascend in the future. Zhang Yan heard it. Qin Qinggang chose to borrow the treasure from Yu Xiao, and not go to another world. This move was not only for the sake of the public, but also for personal reasons. However, if it was him, it would not be good to agree with He Jingxin's suggestion. Otherwise, if the Jinren in the sect knew that only a few people went out, the sect would definitely be in chaos. However, when he thought of that, he suddenly had a thought. He turned to look at sect leader Qin and thought to himself, Sect leader, do you also want to follow this path? At that moment, sect leader Qin's eyes flickered, and he said, in these two questions, the most difficult part is that the Qinsang school sect does not have enough spiritual opportunity, so we can't bring everyone along. However, if there is sufficient spiritual opportunity, not to mention the Qinsang school sect, even the cultivators in the world can pass this test and go to the other world. Zhang Yan's eyes focused. He had already understood the meaning behind the sect leader's words. Where in the world was the most spiritual opportunity? It was none other than the root. After sect leader Qin said this, he didn't say anything else. He just stood there quietly. The surroundings were quiet, and only the sound of their robes fluttering could be heard on the peak. Zhang Yan looked at the 9 continents. After a long time, he said, just now, I'm thinking about it. If it was Hall Master He that day, what should I do? He shook his sleeves, turned around, and bowed with a Dao salute. He said loudly, I will follow your wishes, sect leader. Sect leader Qin's eyes were bright as he looked at him for a moment. Then, he placed the horsetail whisk on the crook of his arm, raised his hands, and said seriously, Hall Master Du Zhen, you may dispense with the formalities. Zhang Yan did not dare to make a sound. He took a step back and stood up straight. Since both parties were already at the bottom, he did not have to worry about speaking at that moment. He asked bluntly, if the sect leader wants to touch the root, Qinsang will become a great enemy of the world. The cultivators of the 9 continents will definitely come and see me as an enemy. Even if Qinsang is powerful, it will be difficult for us to resist the sects in the world. What countermeasures do you have, sect leader? Sect leader Qin waved his horsetail whisk and said, Sect leader Xiao Qingyu and I have long made an oath. If the time is right, the 2 sects will work together to attack. When Zhang Yan heard that, he made up his mind. If Xiao Qingyu and Qinsang worked together, even Yu Xiao could only retreat. However, there were still the 6 great demon sects in this world, as well as the demonic cultivators of the North Underworld and the remaining 7 sects of the Xianmen. Sect leader Qin took a few steps and reached the edge of the cliff. He was just 1 step away from the bottomless abyss. After he stood still, he looked into the distance and said, "The human tribulation will happen in 500 years. I want to act before that." Zhang Yan was slightly stunned. From his point of view, if he waited for the people to touch the root before acting, wouldn't it be more advantageous for Qinsang school? However, on second thought, if he could think of it, it would not be difficult for the sect leader to think of it. However, he still insisted on doing so. There must be a reason behind it. As if he saw the doubt in his heart, sect leader Qin said that Yuxiao's spiritual cliff once landed in the North Underworld and the Middle Continent. If the human tribulation is resolved, the next step will definitely land on Donghua. I suspect that there are other reasons for this. I'm afraid it has something to do with Yuxiao's plan. Since we cannot let them have their way, we might as well act first and take the initiative. When he said that, he paused and said in a deep voice, "Even if it's the human tribulation, I will be the one to open it." Zhang Yan nodded to show that he understood. Just like in a war, if the opponent wanted to do something, they definitely could not let them have their way. However, if that was the case, the alliance that Qinsang school could fight for would be almost non-existent. He thought for a while and his eyes flickered. If we really open the heaven and earth profound latch, there will definitely be sects that are willing to go with us, Qinsang. However, it's hard to say until that moment comes. We should first prepare to fight with the various sects. Shinran. Sect leader Qin said decisively, "Those who are willing to go with us can go. Those who are unwilling can be killed. In the next few hundred years, I will open the Golden Vault and help you all improve your cultivation to the fullest in preparation for the battle in the future." Floating Astronomy. Chapter 936. In a battle between sects, if one side planned ahead, then they would be prepared against the unprepared. Naturally, they would have a higher chance of winning. Especially Qinsang School's Wanzai Xianmen, which had a deep foundation. If they did not care about the cost and used all their resources to groom their disciples, then after a few hundred years, they would be able to accumulate a considerable amount of power. Sect leader Qin said, "Hall Master Duzhen's disciples are all talented. Why don't you bring them to the floating heavenly palace to cultivate? You can read the books in the Golden Pavilion. You can take the external medicine you need to practice your divine arts from the storage. You will have great achievements in the future." When Zhang Yan heard this, he cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, sect leader Zhenren." He was very clear that the sect leader said so. Firstly, his current status was different. Previously, he had praised the sect leader, so he wanted to return the favor. Secondly, his disciples were not bad, especially Lu Yenny and Tian Kuan. They had both cultivated to the third layer of nascent soul realm. In the future, there was hope that they would be of great help. He was also emotional. The battle in a few hundred years was unavoidable. To the disciples, it was a disaster but also an opportunity. If it was in the past, they would not be able to get support from the higher-ups so easily. Sect leader Qin nodded. At this moment, his tone became slightly heavier. "There is one more thing that I need to ask Hall Master Duzhen to do." When Zhang Yan saw his solemn expression, he said solemnly, "Sect leader Zhenren, please speak." Sect leader Qin sighed and said, "My big senior brother, Yan Changsheng, was number one in his generation in terms of divine arts and mana. He should have taken over the position of sect leader. However, he was a chivalrous person and offended many people in the same sect. Later on, because of an old grudge, one of his direct disciples died in vain, and his character became extremely extreme, especially towards the aristocratic families in the sect. Back then, when the sect was in chaos, he broke out of the sect and left. You know what happened after that. However, he had a disciple called Lu Junyang who left with him. This disciple is a rare talent. It is a pity to abandon him outside." Zhang Yan changed his mind. He knew the meaning behind his words. He said, "Does sect leader Reverend want me to personally go and bring him back?" Sect leader Qin said, "This matter can only be done by Hall Master Duzhen. That Yan Shixiang of mine has killed many fellow disciples, but he can't return. However, his disciple is still a disciple of our Qinsang. I'll write a letter later. If you bring it over, he should be able to understand the meaning behind it. Zhang Yan immediately agreed. The sect leader was the leader of a sect. He couldn't act rashly. Moreover, if he used too much force, it would make people suspicious. On the other hand, he had just formed a grotto heaven and was now the new hall head of Duzhen. In the eyes of outsiders, he was in high spirits. Even if he caused a huge commotion, it was still within his expectations. Sect leader Qin warned again. When senior martial brother Yen broke out of the door, either by force or bait, he took a few true artifacts with him. If it's convenient for Hall Master Duzhen, why don't you bring them back as well? I'll allow you to do as you please. A glint flashed across Zhang Yan's eyes. He bowed and said, understood. If there was a big battle, every bit of strength had to be used. Moreover, treasures like Quangjin artifacts had to be taken back no matter what. As for going against the other party's wishes, that wasn't within his consideration. Since they had already decided on a grand plan, whoever dared to stand in their way, no matter what their identity was, they would just crush them one by one. Sect leader Qin said, what do you need for this trip, just tell me. It's not impossible for you to ask North Ming Jinren to come along. Zhang Yan thought for a while before saying, asking North Ming Jinren to come along would cause too much commotion. With Bao Yang Jinren's help, I will definitely be able to give sect leader Jinren an explanation. Sect leader Qin nodded and said, as for the specifics, Hall Master Duzhen can decide on your own. As for Shaoqing sect, I will naturally inform sect leader Yu. At the mention of Shaoqing sect, Zhang Yan suddenly thought that even though he still didn't know who would be standing on his side when the time comes, it didn't matter if he roped in a few allies first. He said, sect leader Jinren, Clearfeather sect leader of distant seas, Tao Jinren, is an old friend of mine. He can be of help to me. Sect leader Qin stroked his beard and thought for a while before saying, I also know about sect leader Tao. He is the direct disciple of Taoist He from Nanhua sect. He broke out of the sect later. If it wasn't for the three great calamities, Clearfeather sect would have a seat among the sects of Donghua mystic sect in the future. Since Hall Master Du Zhen has spoken for him, he can naturally be an ally. If we survive the calamity this time, we can be friends in the future beyond the heavens. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, Clearfeather sect is in the open sea, pressured by the carp tribe and not on good terms with the python tribe. Such a demon will definitely be an opponent of Qinsong in the future. With Tao Jinren's help, we can find an excuse to get rid of him first. His expression was normal, but there was a murderous aura in his words. North Ming's demon cultivators were never on the same side as Qinsong school. Qinsong school would not bring the demon cultivators along, and the demon cultivators would not agree to this. If they got rid of them first, it would save them a lot of trouble in the future. Sect leader Qin smiled and said, if Hall Master Du Zhen is confident, you can act at your own discretion. However, this matter is not urgent and can be planned slowly. Zhang Yan nodded in agreement. This matter could not be done too obviously, and they still had to wait for an opportunity. Otherwise, those who were observant would definitely notice something, and it would be detrimental to the overall situation. He discussed with sect leader Qin for half a day in the upper extreme hall and made many plans. Then, he left. However, when he entered the floating heavenly palace again, he faintly felt a trace of divine qi. At this moment, with a turn of his spirit, he felt that this qi actually came from the clear nether heavenly lake. After sensing for a while, he realized that it actually came from the divine beast egg buried deep in the heavenly lake. Zhang Yan was a little surprised. Ever since he brought this item into the residence, he had never seen any movement from it. At this moment, he could feel a strong vitality of creation. He couldn't help but smile. Could it be that you are also born in response to the calamity? Oh well, it's time to change the boundary for you. He thought for a while and pointed his finger downwards. The egg instantly disappeared from the bottom of the heavenly lake. In the next moment, it appeared in his hand. He took a few glances at it and threw it into his sleeve. Then, he stood up and turned to the Duzhen Hall. Not long after, he returned to the hall and placed the egg in the Xuanzi Sea. He let it absorb the spiritual opportunity there and didn't bother about it anymore. Then, he sat on the jade platform and picked up his brush. He personally wrote letters to Shen, Meng, Sun, and Qi Yintian, saying that he would attend the banquet in a few days. At this moment, a fragrant wind floated over and turned into a graceful woman. She bowed and said, "Master, here is a letter from Hall Master Hua." Zhang Yan looked over and the letter flew over and unfolded in front of him. Many of the letters were congratulatory words. It even said that a congratulatory gift was sent to Zhao Yu Heavenly Lake. There were also some words of reminiscing about the past. After reading it, he thought about it carefully. Before the sect leader wanted to carry out his grand plan, he naturally had to settle the internal discord. Therefore, the position of Hall Master Hua was extremely important. If Hu Xian took over, it would be the most in line with the sect leader's wishes. After thinking for a while, he said, "Go to the hall's storeroom and take out some pill jades. Send them to Hall Master Hua." At this moment, the Zhaoyu Immortal Cave was bustling. After hundreds of years, there were already thousands of disciples in the cave. Many of the younger generation disciples who were training outside were excited when they learned that the patriarch had cultivated a cave. One by one, they rushed back from all over the place. Han Zuoqing had already returned to the cave a month ago. After finishing his homework for the day, he came out for a walk. However, he seemed to be a little depressed. Only when he arrived here did he learn that Jiang Zheng and Wei Zihong had been personally picked up by the Wang sisters. Only he had received a letter. Although he knew that it wasn't intentional, he still felt that he was being looked down upon by his fellow disciples. He couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. Because of this, he made up his mind that no matter what, he had to raise his cultivation. At this moment, he heard someone call him. He looked over in confusion and saw that it was his fourth senior sister, Wang Kading. However, the latter glared at him and said, "Junior brother, what's wrong with you? You won't answer even when I call you a few times?" Han Zuoqing cupped his hands and said, "Junior brother has been impolite. Just now, I'm thinking about a difficult problem in cultivation. My mind is a little distracted." Wang Kading glared at him and snorted twice. "That's not right. You have something on your mind." Han Zuoqing lowered his head and said, "Senior sister, junior brother doesn't have anything on his mind." Wang Kading looked at him suspiciously. After thinking for a while, she said, "Junior brother, you and I are from the same sect. If there's anything, just tell me. Senior sister will definitely help you. If senior sister can't do it, there's still second senior brother. If second senior brother can't do it, there's still eldest senior sister. She'll help you no matter what." Han Zuoqing hurriedly said, "Junior brother is really fine. I won't hide it from senior sister. Junior brother's cultivation isn't strong enough. I'm afraid master will punish me, so I'm nervous." Hearing this explanation, Wang Kading felt relieved. She kindly comforted him, "Junior brother, don't worry about this. It's not like you don't know. Master has never cared about these things." Han Zuoqing said gratefully, "Thank you for your understanding, senior sister." Wang Kading said a few more words and then left. Han Zuoqing let out a sigh of relief and was about to return to the cave. However, he heard a call from behind. "Senior brother Han." Han Zuoqing turned back and saw a tall and well-built cultivator with a beautiful beard smiling at him. He said in surprise, "Junior brother Shen, you've come out of seclusion." He took a few steps forward and grabbed Shindong's arm. He sized him up and said in shock, "Junior brother, could it be that you've already cultivated to the second stage?" Shindong smiled and said, "That's right." His innate talent was extraordinary. He had already cultivated to the Yuanying realm over 100 years ago. After that, he cultivated in this clear nether heavenly lake and finally reached the second stage of the Yuanying realm a few days ago. Then I'll have to congratulate junior brother. Han Zuoqing congratulated him from the bottom of his heart. However, when he thought of himself, he felt a little disappointed. Shindong saw his expression. He was a shrewd person. He could tell what he was thinking by observing his expression. He had always been on good terms with Han Zhucheng. Although he had utilitarian thoughts in the beginning, he really treated the latter as a good friend now. Even if the latter was only a core formation cultivator, he did not care. In his opinion, as a cultivator, Han Zhucheng had many shortcomings, but he treated people sincerely. Not to mention other things, even many things in his cultivation were obtained from Han Zhucheng's help. Han Zhucheng never asked for anything in return. He was also very grateful for this. He patted Shindong's shoulder heavily and said, "I haven't drunk with junior brother Han for a long time. Call that old flood dragon up. We'll go and have another drink." Han Zhucheng also revealed a smile and nodded heavily. "Okay, we won't return until we're drunk."